Hi, Tamás.
Hi, Anand. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Hope you too.
Yeah, I'm fine. It's an honor to have you here today.
It's my pleasure to talk to you again.
Yeah. So today my guest is Tamás Terlaky. He's full professor at the Lehigh University and the director of the Quantum Computing and Optimization Laboratory. He has published 4 books, edited over 10 books and journal special issues, and published over 220 research papers. His research interest includes high-performance optimization methods, optimization modeling, optimization problems in engineering sciences, and quantum computing optimization. Tamás is founding editor-in-chief of the journal Optimization and Engineering and editor-in-chief of the Journal of Optimization Theory and Applications. He has served as associate editor of 10 journals and has served as conference chair, conference organizer, and distinguished invited speaker at conferences all over the world. He was general chair of the INFORMS 2015 annual meeting, a former chair of INFORMS Optimization Society, chair of the ICCOPT Committee of the Mathematical Optimization Society, and chair of the SIAM Activity Groupon Optimization. He received the MITACS Mentorship Award for his distinguished Ph.D. student supervisory record, the Egerváry Award of the Hungarian OR Society, the Award of Merit of the Canadian OR Society, the Wagner Prize of INFORMS, and the Outstanding Innovation in Service Science Engineering Award of IISc. Tamás is a fellow of the following organizations: Field Institute, INFORMS, SIAM, IFORS, and the Canadian Academy of Engineering. Tamás, after this very long introduction, I would just like to say that I'm really happy to have you here, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
It's my pleasure to be here, and thanks for the nice introduction.
Yeah, so let's start. Tamás, you were born in 1955 in Hungary. Where exactly?
I born in 1955 in Hungary. The name of the town is Kaposvár. Kaposvár is the southwest of Hungary. That's not too far from the Croatian border. That's a relatively small town. It's about 60, 70,000 people living there. That's the capital of the local province on that.
Right. It seems that Terlaky is a rather unique name worldwide. What's the story behind it?
Yeah, indeed. I don't have to worry about that people are mixing me with others in the scientific world. There are exactly 10 people in the world living with this last name. And that story goes back to my grandfather. So essentially, my grandfather created this name. And I might say that was not very unique, creating Hungarian sounding names at the beginning of the 20th century in Hungary. That's when Hungary, after 400 years, started to get more and more independent. And the original name was Terkovic. Most probably a Croatian name, but we don't really know the exact origin of it. And in 2 steps, my grandfather, as a good soldier in the First World War and a good notaris as a civil servant, got the, I would say, distinguished award, can choose a Hungarian name. And then first time was choosing Terlaky, because it sounds also like Terkovic partly, and sounds very Hungarian. But in that time, first it was just written by an I at the end instead of a Y. The second award was that he was allowed to choose an Y at the end of the name, because that sounds like Nobel in Hungarian. And I might add that just for the mathematical community, that, as I said, it's not very unique. Like Paul Erdős, everybody knows. His original family name, what his father changed, was Englander. And there are several other stories with that in the
Wow, that's
beginning of the
incredible.
20th century.
Yeah, it's very cool that you can choose your name.
That time it was not only you could choose, but it's as a reward. If you don't choose a Hungarian sounding name, you might lose your job.
Oh, okay.
Civil servant. It's a great
Yeah.
reward, but you have to accept it.
Yeah, so based on this, something tells me that your family background is very interesting. Am I right?
My grandfather, I said, he was creating this name. He was born and grown up in a very small village. It's just about 30 kilometers from Kaposvár. He was really the first person who went beyond what they called at that time 6 elementary schools, when people just essentially learned read and write. So he, on his own, as a very talented person, went to high school and then was enlisted in the First World War. So that in the Italian front, so in the worst battles in the Italian front, he participated. I would say luckily he survived. His older brother in the Russian front on the Far East, unfortunately passed away. And then as a notaris, then he also sponsored the education of his younger brother, who became a medical doctor. And for until he died, he was the doctor of a village and the neighboring communities. And my grandfather had only one son, my father, so the line of the name of Terlaky was hanging on that single string at that time. And then from there, we later got 4 siblings in that. But there's many other interesting stories, because my grandfather was coming from a really poor background. So he was always a civil servant, notaris of a village, which was like a higher class person at that time. But he was still preserved for his humility. When the Russians were coming in the Second World War, he said, "Oh, finally something more equal is coming." And he was funding the Communist Party. That's a small unit in his village at that time. So he organized that, okay, finally some real better life is coming. And but his enthusiasm didn't last too long, because my father was at that time just about 20 years old when the Russians arrived. Then, among many other things, what they did, they also took many people, including my father, to what is called malenki robot in Russian. So it's for a little labor. And then many of those people disappeared and some never returned. Luckily, my father returned after a few days, but that was enough that my grandfather dissolved the Communist Party unit. That's not exactly what he was hoping for. And obviously, he had to pay the price for it later when the Russians were, let's say, staying in Hungary for the next many years.
Wow, I knew you had some very interesting family background. And could you talk more about your father?
Yeah, it's my father was also a very special, talented person. So he was a great athlete. So he was, as a youth, he was in the Hungarian selection. During the Second World War, he was even competing in Rome in the European, or I would say Central European Games at that time. He was first also a notaris, as my grandfather. But after the Second World War, when everything started to settle, then he also learned law and got a law degree in a night course in another town, Pécs, at that time. But that was a very hard time in Hungary for, let's say, get living and so on. So my father, at a certain point when I was close to be born, had a very horrific bike accident. So he barely survived. His liver was completely destroyed. He had many surgeries. And as I heard at that time, that in 2 different wings of the hospital, my mother was in giving birth of me, and my father on the other side fighting for survival. But luckily survived, and we really had a great family life after that.
Amazing. And it seems that your father was an excellent musician, right?
And I said that life was not easy at that time. So especially also with my grandfather was, let's say, not a favored person at that time. So he had to retire early. So my father was a great musician. So he was playing harmonium, banjo, and was forming a small band with some of his colleagues and friends, went to weddings and other occasions to play. And obviously that was giving some extra income to support the large family at that time. And by doing all of this, as I said, he was still going also to university. So down at the street where we were working, there was a big stone. So we as a kids were playing and doing, let's say, everything what a young kid is doing. And he was studying sitting on the learning stone, as we called it at that time.
So he graduated finally.
He graduated and then become later head of the legal department of the county and the city where I've been. And,
so he went to law school then?
Yeah, he did the law school in really a kind of distance evening course. So he had to go regularly, like once in every other week for a day or two to this other town, Page, where the university was. So obviously as a kids, we didn't really know exactly what he's doing. We just seen that he's always busy, either disappearing for playing music.
What about you and your siblings? Did you play any musical instrument too?
I say that was the big disappointment for my father. He tried to enroll us in the local music school, but actually all of us was dismissed. We didn't really have the musical talent. We didn't really could sing in a proper way. We still like music because there was always music at home. But as genetics and life is going on, that my son Victor is playing guitar. My brother's son also playing guitar when the university time was playing in a band. So the next generation, there's much more musical talent than with me and my siblings.
Yeah.
Interestingly, we were more on the natural science side. So my sister became also a high school math physics teacher and was finally teaching in the same high school what we all learned, and all my grandfathers learned, and my brother became a chemical engineer.
And what about the other sister?
He's the only one who didn't finish the university, so she finished high school, got married quite soon. That's also an interesting place because she married to a Hungarian person in 2 kilometers on the other side of the Hungarian border, at that time Yugoslavia. Today it's called Serbia, but that's a traditional Hungarian area. So she got married quite young, and then essentially was and still living a very, let's say, common, normal, every person's life in a very small village.
And what about your mother?
My mother, both of them had parents who were notaris of a village. So the grandparents did know each other from there. And so both of them are kids of notaris of a village. So obviously for many years, my mother was busy with the 4 kids, taking care of all of us. And then in the early 60s, went also to work in the same government office, or the county office, where my father became a kind of accountant with the let's say, electronic machines at that time. She learned all of that, and that's what she did until she retired in sometimes around 1989.
Wow. And how was life back in the day in Kaposvár?
It was a nice, small, very peaceful, small town. So we were not even living in the very center of the town, more close to the suburbs. So at that time started to build a lot of new developments outside. But with small walking distance, we had farms, so we got milk and cottage cheese and sour cream directly from the farmer. We played a lot of football and other games, but without any, let's say, equipment, just a ball and nothing else. Running a lot in hiking and in the nearby woods, let's say, having some old bikes and then breaking them a number of times by falling. So we had a very fun time as a small kids. And then went to primary school and gymnasium, which is the high school equivalent in Hungary, so in the same town. So I started to play in the school basketball and handball, but my favorite was really basketball. So played in the gymnasium's team. So we were, let's say, in the county, probably the best team, but not in the country. And played also other things like chess. I played a lot of chess with my grandfather. He was a very smart man, so we never learned it beyond just experimenting. And that was good enough for me to win sometimes the youth city championship in Kaposvár. So again, I haven't learned any tricks or I haven't learned any books, just pure logic and thinking.
Incredible. Have you met any of the Polgar sisters?
They are much younger than I am, so obviously couldn't meet them at that time. But in Hungary, that was definitely a very popular, well-known experiment that the father was trying to prove that women mentally are as strong as men. So I never met them in person, but heard a lot about them.
Yeah, they're fantastic chess players, especially Judith, right? Yeah. And you also mentioned football or soccer, as you wish. I know you were very young, but did you ever have the chance to see Puskás play?
No. I born in 55. As far as I know, he left Hungary in 56. So he was in the golden team in the early 50s, so which the team was beating England in London, first time in history, and then even more when they come to revenge to Budapest, they got beaten even more. And obviously that golden team was expected to win the World Cup, but beat Germany badly in the
I know.
in the first rounds and finally lost in the final. So there was a kind of natural tragedy. But there's still probably the most popular sport in Hungary. Also, every politician trying to make use of it, that cheering up mobile. The younger brother of my mother was also playing football in the city team. Looking at as a small young kid, he was a brilliant football player, although he never made up beyond the city, as we learned later.
Yeah. And what kinds of books did you like to read when you were young?
We read a lot of books. My mother, father was always bringing books home. That's what we got for Christmas and other occasions. Read a lot of Hungarian history. Obviously, according to our age books. So I always enjoyed all of those old stories from the time when the Turks were occupying Hungary and when the Hungarian freedom fighters against the Habsburgs, but also all of the international, I would say, Indian stories from Karl May, Winnetou, and Mark Twain. I would say that's one of the things what I'm still missing. That at that time I was reading a lot of books. Now I'm doing a lot of mathematics and reading a lot of mathematical papers and theses and others, but very little literature.
Right. I imagine the education you received in Kaposvár was very good, wasn't it?
Education was very good. So we had good teachers in the primary school. We had excellent teachers in the gymnasium. So that especially our class master, Kati Gál, she was a very young teacher at that time. We were the first class where she was a class master. She was teaching mathematics and physics, and she encouraged a lot of us to do really good things later in our life. So there's a class with elevated mathematics and physics. So we got more than twice the number of hours what a regular gymnasium class got. Did a lot of competitions. And I might say even today that she definitely inspired me to do mathematics. And even today, I'm sure that she trusted me a lot more than I ever trusted myself on that. And I'm still very happy that she's still alive. I just visited her this summer.
This is so good to hear. Yeah, that you had this influence from a young math teacher, and she deserves all the credit. Yeah. And since you mentioned competitions, could you talk about the QCOL competition in Hungary, highlighting its importance, some distinguished names who have excelled in it, in your own performance?
QCOL is a very special thing in Hungary. It was founded in 1893-94 by a high school teacher in Győr, which is similar. It's a little bit bigger city than Kaposvár, but not in the direction of Vienna. And it started to produce problems for high school students where they have to solve it. Obviously, at that time, for more than 100 years, everything went with regular mail, not by email or anything like that. So this is a competition for high school students. So like every month, this QCOL, that's high school mathematical letters, publish the number of problems, give about 2 weeks to solve it. Then you have to write it down, put it in an envelope, send it in. And then with the guidance of some young older professors in Budapest, they were evaluated. And then with a point system, you got ranking of the problem solvers. So in a few years, I was also among the top problem solvers, but even more interestingly, many famous Hungarian mathematicians like Paul Turan, the number theory combinatorics, Paul Erdős, that's where they also got good friends, Laci Lovász, and many others. Pretty much everybody in Hungary who become a successful mathematician was taking part of all of those competitions. And interestingly, actually, in the last 2 weeks, I learned that there's an American version of it. It's called the United States of America Mathematical Talent Search. And that was funded by a math professor called George Berzsenyi. It's also a Hungarian who, left Hungary in 1956 in a kind of interesting story. He was also from the same county originally where I'm from, but he went to a different gymnasium in a different city and then became professor in the US. And then in 1989, he funded this American competition modeled after QCOL. But by now it's almost 132 years. QCOL is still going, and high school students are still solving those problems and producing good mathematicians.
Wow. And you ranked third when you participate in the competition, right?
I did it every year. Once I got third. That was my best ever result.
Very impressive. And what's the Hungary's secret to producing so many outstanding mathematicians?
It's a significant part is definitely this QCOL competition, because talented people are getting interested in mathematics, getting intrigued and passionate about solving problems, in some way early exploring or experiencing the success of there's something challenging what you don't know. And finally, you get a solution, and then you get some reward for it. And obviously, this produced a lot of good mathematical talents. And then when you have a good culture, then it just amplifies and keeps going.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, the number of Hungarian mathematicians that have made astonishing discoveries and contributions, it's just mind-boggling. And I suppose you underwent military service after completing high school. How was that experience?
Yeah, so after completing high school, obviously we had to first go to a nationwide competition to get enrollment in the university. So that was organized centrally. So you get some points for your high school grades, your final exams in high school. There was a written and oral exam for the entrance to university. So I was very happy and happy to say that I passed it, and I got enrolled in the most prestigious part of the Hungarian education at that time, being a mathematician at Eötvös University. I might add that my classmaster Kati Gál, I mentioned, she was very encouraging, and she trusted me that I will be able to do it, while his boss, the leader of the math group at that time of the high school, he was saying that I will never make it. But
really?
He never taught me directly. He just, he was a good man in a way. He was the classmaster of my older sister.
Oh, right.
They had good time with it, but some way he didn't trust me. But anyway, after enrolling in school, at that time the rule was in Hungary that everyone was getting an enrollment in a university have to go for a year, more precisely 11-month military service, in some way to learn the real life, how the hard life is. And then after the university finished, then we have to go to another year at that time to get really the officer's training. But the first year was really just you are the most common private in it. Now the interesting was in that we went to obviously to the medical exam for military. Everybody had to be tested for blood pressure, height, weight, everything, and your eye. And then part of the eye exam, as everybody knows, is that you have to read something on a board. So the doctor said, cover one of your eye and read. So I covered one of my eye and I started to read, and I read everything on the board. And he said, cover your other eye and read. I covered my other eye and read. And the guy said, I didn't told you use your other hand. I told you cover your other eye. So by automatically, I just covered both time my right eye. And then I said, cover your left eye. And I said, where is the board? So that was a kind of shocking discovery that I almost see nothing with my right eye.
But you realized that only by doing that test?
Yes. Until that time, I never realized that.
That's insane.
So I see very good, even today with that one eye. So I need only for close by reading these glasses. Actually, but this part is totally useless anyway. But that was the time when I realized that actually I don't see to one of my eye. I see very little, some very hazy contours, but almost nothing. And then they examined it and they decided that I see 5% of the normal. And then they took a piece of paper and said, yeah, that's okay. You can go to the military because the limit is 3% and you are fine. And anyway, and this is my right eye and I'm right-handed. So in the military, you have to shoot. Mm-hmm. I also have to shoot. But with right-handed, I have to use my right eye, but I couldn't really use anything on that because I don't see with it. If I try to look at my left eye, then everything got crooked up. So anyway, so I was shooting everywhere except the target, and I got extra bullets to practice more from the commanding officers, but without any useful results. So finally, the head of our unit was taking my gun, laid next to me, shoot the target, and declared that I'm successfully passed the test.
Yeah, so they really wanted you to be part of the service.
Yeah. But I would say, luckily, after the university, for some reason, they lost my papers. As I moved from my hometown Kaposvár to Budapest, so my papers didn't really follow me. I left Kaposvár, but I never arrived to Budapest. I learned that 30 years later.
So you never had to return to do the second year?
At that time, I just enjoyed, and they never called me back. And I always expected that they will find it and they will call me back, but they didn't.
Right. This is quite crazy. Yeah. And how were your first years at the university?
So I said that Eötvös University, the mathematics education, that was very rigorous. And the West University in Hungary, and we had really great teachers, Paul Turan and many others. I just mentioned Paul Turan because he was in the first semester was teaching number theory. So he was really well known in the world for number theory and combinatorics. So very good friend of Paul Erdős, I think just about 2.5 years older. So they had a lot of things together. And he was a really inspiring teacher. So he was wonderful. We were the last group who he was teaching. A year and a half later, he died due to leukemia, relatively young. But the other part of this mathematics education, that everything was extremely axiomatic. So we learned axiomatic number theory, axiomatic analysis, axiomatic algebra, axiomatic geometry. And the most hilarious, but nobody wants to believe me when I mention it, that in geometry, in the first semester, for about 6 weeks' time, with 17 steps, we proved that in the line, in an axiomatic way, you can prove that there are two directions, left and right. So that was unexpected, but I would say very hard exercise on pure logic and very carefully following only what is the axioms and the others what is already proved. Then you cannot use your intuition, you cannot be lousy with it. But so the first 2 years pretty much went mostly with that. The third year it got a little bit, let's say, more advanced, and we got also in the second part of the second year also exposed to other topics.
Mm-hmm. And what a privilege it should have been to attend the classes by Paul Turan, especially when he was, close to his death, right? So
obviously we didn't know at that time. But
yeah, I know, but still, it was for sure an incredible experience. And did you have programming and optimization classes?
Programming is a dubious word because you can use it for linear programming, non-linear programming, but you can use it also for computer programming. So actually we had both of them in this first year, in the later part. For general computer programming, that's what I'm saying to my students even today. My computer age is at least 10 years older than my actual age compared. So we learned a basic, I would say, assembly-like language on punch tapes using an old Polish computer. It's a good exercise. But more important for what I'm doing today is we had also a linear programming class, Introduction to Linear Programming. So that's where we learned about duality theory, the basic simplex algorithm, primal simplex, dual simplex. And I have to say at that time, it was a kind of very boring class was taught. We learned the rules, but we were not really taught why those are.
Little did you know that later you would have contributed directly to linear programming. Yeah, that's so fun. And you got married in 1977 during your third year at university and after learning about linear programming. So how were the logistics of your early married life?
So met my wife by no more than 50 years ago in May 1975 when she was just 19 years old, but arranged a birthday party, and one of her good high school friends was my classmate at the mathematics. And they were short of boys, so they were, how can we get some more boys? And the girlfriend said, oh, we have a lot of them in the mathematics. So anyway, so that's how we started, and then a year and a half later, January 1977, we got married. And my wife's mother was working in the Hungarian oil industry, center office of the big oil trust. So we, as a young married couple, had all the, I would say, interesting things around that, how to live on two student things. My wife was still working as a nurse in the first year. And then she also enrolled in physiotherapy school. Obviously, our parents were shocked that we are going to be married, but then accepted and got very supportive. So we had a very good time in that time in a way that we enjoyed. But that also helped me to choose operations research from that time.
How did that happen then? What led you to choose a path in OR?
Okay, so the path to OR was we had five directions possible after 3 years of basic mathematics training with a very minimal exposure to, let's say, something more advanced at the time. We could choose either probability or statistics, algebra or analysis or applied mathematics or operations research. So on one side, I was looking through that, okay, I don't really like probability theory, I like algebra. Operations research was not the most exciting class, but it looked very useful on that. So on my kind of excluding and what might interest me, I was leaning towards going to operations research. But my wife's mother was also introducing me to what they called at the time the computer and automation group of the only huge oil refinery of Hungary, so which is about 40 kilometers south of Budapest, Százhalombatta. And so that group started to do production planning with a computer at the time, what was an IBM 360. At that time, it was a super powerful modern machine, which later I learned it was already 10 years outdated. That was the computer what was used in the 1960s also to the moon landing. On that, it was a very powerful computer with 128 kilobyte total memory. We could use only 57 kilobytes because it was running in 2 partitions. Every input was by punch cards. Larger data was stored in tapes. So the meeting with the leader of that group, he said, "Yep, we can give you a contract. We are paying you enough money." That I would say would make my married life possible financially. But after graduation, you have to come here for the same length of time to work with us. So I looked at it, okay, this sounds a decent deal. At that time, I was not thinking about doing research or anything. I didn't even realize at that time that what would possibly be like a professional life or a researcher life. That was the time also when I started to learn English. Until that point, I was not learning any English. But that was the other side of it. That okay, I'm getting paid to learn, or married life is getting balanced, and my job after graduation is also secured. I thought it's a deal.
And what types of problems did you solve using the IBM computers? And could you also comment on their size and computational challenges faced at the time?
That was when we really solved the problems was after graduation, when I really got full time there, not during the university time. But at that time, we solved problems with about 1,000, 1,300 variables. It took about 4 or 5 hours to solve it in the first time. And all of that could have been done actually only in the night time, because daytime the computer was used for, let's say, more administrative, more essential things like paycheck processing, also inventory, and many other things. So planning was restricted for nighttime at the time. But that time, the 1,000 variables seems to be a huge problem.
Wow. And what software did you use?
So first, when I started, then it was the IBM, so IBM 360. So every software was IBM at that time. So also the linear programming solver first was LPS, the linear programming solver, and then by the time I graduated, that became MPS, the mathematical programming system. So the LPS had only linear. The MPS already allowed some integer variables, but they said you never should use more than 10 because then it will take forever to trying to solve the problem. So that was the initial setup of doing production planning. Later went also to gasoline blending and maintenance scheduling problems on that. So I really, did actual industry work, mostly interesting modeling, and then get everything solved, I would say, in a time. And that was one of my great achievements, that before I really went there full time and then realized that how things are going and solving a problem is like 4 hours. So if we give that problem to in the evening or at the end of the day to the operators, frequently next morning was coming back, problem is infeasible. Or problem is unbounded. Obviously, the solution out of it was nothing useful. So if you play that for a week, then by the time you get an optimized solution, which is useful, then the planning period is over. So one of my great innovation was that after graduation, when I worked there, is that actually I made a deal with my bosses. I'm staying there for the night, and I'm actually making all the corrections in the night. And in 2 or 3 days' time, we got something which was impossible to get it for like more than a week, 10 days' time before. So they realized actually what is coming out from this linear programming production planning models, it's useful on that. So I got complete freedom. For the oil refinery was a national interest and a very militarily organized hard regime group industry.
Yeah.
So I could leave or be there anytime when I wanted. The only thing was that I have to deliver.
Right. We're going to talk more about that later. You got married in 1977, but also in 1977, you went to Russia for 6 crazy weeks. What can you share about this trip?
1977, that was just right after I got married. And it was a kind of summer, as we called it, building camp or construction camp. There's no really good English word for that. The purpose was you could do it also inside Hungary, or working on high school buildings or in agricultural organizations. They did it also in high school time. But that year I got in a selected group of university students from my university who were selected to go to the Soviet Union. To go to Novosibirsk, to be more precise, the capital of Siberia. And I've been only in Poland before outside of Hungary, so that was super exciting going to the Soviet Union, which at that time was obviously looking, especially from Hungary, the center of the world, one of the greatest power on that. So it was about 23, 24 students, I don't remember the exact number anymore, selected. And then the arrangement was we go there for, the initial arrangement, go there for 4 weeks to work. And then after that, we have a kind of trip to see some other parts of the Soviet Union, essentially the reward for the hard work what we were supposed to do. So after all, the group was put together. We had a meeting with a group leader who was a young assistant professor at the time, and they said we have to go to the meeting with the party secretary of the university at that time. And then we were very well treated. It was a kind of unusual why such a high-level person wants to speak with a bunch of students. And then we were very well treated, got cakes and tea and others. And then the only message was that just behave, because the Soviet Union is the greatest power. You have to representing Hungary properly. And just keep also in mind that if you be there, there's the Hungarians and the Russians, the Soviet people, will follow Lenin's teaching. 8 hours work, 8 hours leisure, and 8 hours sleeping. That's really what we learned from primary school on that. But why to say it by a party secretary at that time? Obviously, we went then for a kind of exploratory trip to trying to find, at the university. finding the people who've been there last year. And we find some of them, and then privately we learned that actually the Hungarian and Polish group went on strike previous year in the same place in Novosibirsk, in the middle of the Soviet Union, because they were expected to work like 14, 15 hours a day. And they went on strike and they said that they are just fighting for what Lenin was teaching us. Okay, so we said, okay, this sounds starting to be interesting. So at that point, we just said, okay, we already know what to expect, but we didn't know exactly really what to expect. We just said that we might be asked to work a lot of hours. But getting to Novosibirsk, we got a similar invitation to the party secretary of Novosibirsk, who was giving us the same speech as the Hungarian at the university, that just be sure that we are following Lenin's teaching. There is no question about it. And that was a meeting only with the Hungarian and Polish group. But there was groups from every socialist country. So Germany, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Poland, and so on. So only we got this nice training. So that was a kind of interesting, okay, what's going on here? And then we started to, let's say, accommodate all of us, all of the international groups got a partner group from Russia, mostly from Moscow. So we were living together, doing things together, playing football together. And we went working together, but everything was horribly badly organized. So all the day when we were supposed to work, we played football and other games, but we were supposed to lay concrete for huge parking lots and foundations of buildings, but the concrete was not coming. So when time arrived, as it was said that we have to go back to the accommodation, but they said the Russians are still eagerly waiting for the concrete. And so we went back to accommodation, played again for whatever we could. And then like 6-7 hours later, the Russians were coming with exhausted because they did all the work. Because the concrete finally was coming later. Uh-huh. So after a few days, we said that that's not fair. Let's just do it together. As long as we play football, we don't count it necessarily as an hour to work. So we made good friends on that. So that was one part of this whole horribly organized everything was.
I mean, your group with the Polish group too, right? You were together.
Yeah, and also with our partner Russian groups.
Right.
So anyway, so we were laying concrete, we were isolating buildings around windows and so on. You know, Siberia is cold in the winter, so some isolation has to be.
So labor camp in Siberia should have been, you know, yay, a lot of fun.
Yeah. But it was voluntary.
Yeah, right.
And I would say after the 4 weeks, that part was over. Then we were invited to the secretary again in Novosibirsk. But okay, now the 2 weeks leisure is coming, and there are two options to go to see the, let's say, new cities, industrial cities behind the Ural Mountain, also in Siberia, when all of these nuclear reactors and other machine companies was established, or to go to the south, to Almaty, Tashkent, Samarkand, to see the old south. And then he immediately said that we understand that you are enthusiasts, young people from friendly socialist countries. You choose the first one.
Okay.
Going to seeing the new cities, new achievements of the Soviet Union. And actually with the Polish group, we just looked at each other and said, actually, if we want to go to the south.
You wanted the real deal.
So we want to say, okay, probably the socialist cities are true, but we also all have all of those built on Russian in our countries. But seeing Almaty, Tashkent, Samarkand, that's something very exotic, very interesting. So we said that, no, we want to go to the south. Obviously, that was a problem because they didn't wanted us to go there. So we got say vodka and other good treatments. They said, okay, just stay here and wait. And I think they went back and talked with the higher ups what to do in this case. And then finally they decided they don't want this let's say last year big trouble repeating in any way.
You were scared that you'd go on strike.
Yeah. So finally we got what we wanted. So we went to Almaty, Tashkent, Samarkand, and seen all of these old cities from the old Silk Route. The only problem was when we got to Tashkent and wanted to go next day to Samarkand, and they said, oh no, that's not going to happen because there was an earthquake and the city is closed. So that part of the program is scrapped. You're just stuck here. some of my colleagues were speaking better Russian than I did. They went to the train station and said, "Oh no, trains are going. We can just jump on the trains." And then they checked also the schedule. It was several hours train ride. So we told the Russian group leader who was assigned to us, guiding us all the way, don't look for us for the next day or two because we go to Samarkand. Obviously, he got scared because he said, if you do that, I will go to a real labor camp to Kamchatka. And I'm not sure when I come back. So no, that's not your fault. We are doing it. It doesn't matter if you do it. That's what I do. So they collect a little bit of money and he tries to find a solution. So finally he bribed the train people and arranged that trip. So later in the evening, when it was already dark, we got a separate wagon, completely shielded with curtains from inside. They said we cannot move the curtains. It was attached to a train. We got to Samarkand. We had wonderful time there in the evening. We got a nice light and music show in Timur Bey's Jami, one of the most prominent mosque from that time. And then we did the trip back the next night. So it was I would say, never to forget experience, and I don't think it can be repeated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so that was one of the hilarious stories there. Another one was also that when we arrived to Almaty in Kazakhstan and was on the airport, and at that time the Russians had the Tupolev 144, the supersonic plane, copied from Concorde, and that was just landing in the Almaty airport. So one of my colleagues was taking his camera, with the films at that time, and then made the picture. So his hand was still up when he was grabbed from the back by two guys, and he disappeared.
Whoa.
So we, obviously all of us got a bit of scared that, okay, this was certainly the KGB. Because in general, we didn't know that it's forbidden to make photographs in airports and critical things, but especially that supersonic plane was a special forbidden thing to do. So we were worried what's happening with him and what will happen also with us as a kind of byproduct.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it took a few hours when finally, and obviously our Russian group leader was trying to find anyway, where it is, what's happening, but he couldn't find anything. So finally the guy showed up with a kind of sad but smiling face. He said, okay, I'm here, we can go. When we got to some, let's say, safe place far away, he said that, yeah, indeed, he was put to the military commandant office of the airport, the two guys who grabbed him got some reward for being vigilant and very truthful for the mission of the Soviet Union, and he sent them away. And then, let's say, put a bit of pressure and tension in the sphere, not talking much to our colleague. And then he turned around the bookshelf behind his desk. And the other side of the bookshelf was a complete bar with whiskey, cognac, and other things.
No kidding.
Which was...
Why I'm not surprised.
So anyway, so the guy said, okay, no, we have to drink for an hour or two just to attend the time. Nobody can come in because I said I will teach you a hard lesson, and anytime you get out, you will have to say that I was really giving you a hard lesson. I took out the film from your camera, but I will not do it. That's not that important. So after getting back to Hungary, we got a photo of the Tupolev 144 landing in Almaty. So that just showed that the system was, I would say, not really well organized, but allowed really all of these hilarious stories.
Yeah, this is just insane, Tamás, and fascinating at the same time. Yeah, so let's continue talking about your academic trajectory now. You obtained the equivalent of a master's degree in 1979. Then you went for your PhD, and of course you were working at the refinery at the same time. Your master's and PhD research were on the same topic, right?
Right. It's exactly the same. So as I said earlier, that I started or made the choice of operations research specialization, but that was really part of the mathematics program. So there was not too much applications, although there was one course on a kind of production economics taught by some guy from the Technical University, but everything else was mathematics. So linear, non-linear, discrete, stochastic programming, combinatorics, and we learned a lot of algorithms. So the non-linear programming part was taught by Emil Klofsky. So he was my mentor, supervisor, both for the master, for PhD, and even later for the candidate of science degree. So he was a wonderful teacher. He gave me all the good advice. He was not speaking any other language, only Hungarian, but he was telling me from day one, you have to learn English because everything is important is written in English. And if you want to publish, you have to write in English. So at that time, I really started to learn English on that. So both my master and PhD was on what's called LP programming. It's p-norm constrained convex nonlinear optimization problem. It's a variant of geometric programming. So obviously the master thesis was much more elementary than the PhD 2 years later. And I did my PhD in the 2 years when I was working in oil refinery. I already mentioned earlier that with essentially getting production planning, linear programming useful for the refinery and all of the bosses, I gained freedom. So when I was working night in the oil refinery, most of the daytime I went to the Met Institute's library and learned papers, read books, did my research. So I really did my PhD as a part-time job in less than 2 years' time.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And so the long paper coming out of it, also because my English was really horrible at the beginning and still very weak at the early 80s, was published in 1985 in Ejor. So that was at that time a kind of huge achievement.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I might say also that the first referee report that I got for it was a very interesting referee report. So the guy was writing that, okay, I checked everything, all the proofs are correct, all the definitions are very rigorous, but this looks like someone copied from a blackboard and forget to make notices of the instructor's narrative. So the paper is in a very good shape, except have to write text between theorems, lemmas, and proofs. So it took 2 more iterations, but that's when.
Yeah.
So really this experience that really launched me to, okay, I really want to be a researcher. I really want to be a professor. While I enjoyed to doing all of those production planning and actual practical problems, when really writing on huge piece of paper plugged on the wall, writing the equations from wall to wall, and then translating it to punch cards, and then making all the modifications with that. But after less than 2 years, I was already quite clear in my mind that actually I want to do something different.
Yeah.
And I had many discussions with my wife at that time. And again, just like my math teacher in high school, she was encouraging me that I really should do it. I was still not completely confident that I can do it.
Uh-huh. And after earning your PhD in 1981, you began teaching at the same university. And around that time, you asked your boss for a job rearrangement, correct?
I said that getting married, I got this contract with the oil company, the oil refinery, that they pay me as long as I'm studying, a monthly stipend, and I have to work with them for exactly the same amount of time. So by the time I got my PhD, that was only a year and a half, where I got the scholarship for 2.5 years. But that time, after getting PhD, there was an opening in the numerical analysis department at the university. There was no operations research department yet, but the probability theory and the department was managing the OR program. Every teacher from outside, nobody from inside. And so there was an opening. So I talking with the head of both the probability theory and the numerical analysis department, they said that, okay, if I can come from next September, I can have that job. That was like in April. And I said that's a bit of difficult because I have the obligation to stay in oil industry. So I went to my boss. By that time, I already moved from the oil refinery to the central office, but still kept many of the planning work also in the oil refinery. So I went to him. He was an interesting guy because in his previous life, he was a Secret Service commander, a mid-level officer, not a very high. he was a very common sense person. He was checking everybody like in military. But with him, I also had full freedoms. So I went to him that, okay, I have this opportunity to go to the university, but I know that there's a problem because I have a contract to stay here longer. And I asked him, can we find some solution for that? And the guy was looking at me and said, I was sure that the time will come when you will come with this. I just know how you work and you know what you do. I expected that this will happen, although I hope that it will happen later. So I was just waiting where he's going. And he said, okay, what you are doing is important, but I don't want to block you to do what you really like to do and what you will be good at. So you can go, you can take that job, but I have one condition. I said, okay, what is the condition? He said, it's very simple. You take that job at the university and you stay here a half-time, part-time job. Obviously, we pay for it, a proper salary, and you just have to keep doing what you did. I said, that's okay. That's the deal. I did it also so far, doing my Ph.D., let's say, on my time and having this job. No, I will be my university job full-time and doing this part-time and getting paid now for both, not only for one. So that was a good arrangement. So I kept that part-time job until August 1989 when I left Hungary and went to the Netherlands. So even 30 years later, when I visited back some friends, they were in the oil industry, they were still looking at me that, okay, I established production planning optimization in oil industry, which was definitely a nice feeling, even 30 years later.
That's very cool. And Tamás, what's the story behind your well-known criss-cross algorithm, and why is it considered elegant but still not widely used in practice?
Yeah. Okay, so the criss-cross algorithm that was coming a kind of, that's an interest, but I'm not sure that I really wanted to do it as a research project. Obviously, I was interested everything in the early 80s after moving back to the university, and I finished my master Ph.D., which was convex nonlinear optimization. I started to learn everything about pivot algorithms. So that time I really discovered that linear programming, linear optimization is really a fascinating field. It's beautiful mathematics, combinatorics, geometry, algebra, and very useful. By the time I used it very extensively.
So it was no longer boring.
It was absolutely not boring. I really discovered that it's really fascinating. So I really was reading everything what I could get in the library or from other colleagues on that. So my supervisor was giving me a paper at a certain point from Stan Zion's. It was the title of a criss-cross method. And it was a pivot algorithm alternating primal and dual pivots. He couldn't really prove anything about it, but my supervisor was saying that, yeah, this is what people are already trying to do for 20, 30 years, to have a pivot algorithm which is without two phases. With the two phases, it's cumbersome, solving two problems. You have to work out other cases in the transition. So that was a kind of thing, okay, why not to try to have some algorithm which is one phase? So I learned everything around it, and that time was also coming from other side, part of the optimization theory, what I call it like consistent selection. That time was a number of papers, like Bland was writing the minimal index rule for the primal and dual simplex method with this finiteness proof. Was Albert Tucker. I think he's the son of the Kuhn Tucker, Albert Tucker, from Stony Brook, was writing the same consistent selection algorithm for max flow problems, proving that it's finitely convergent optimization without things. So there were multiple sources when this consistent selection was coming. So it got stuck in my mind, and I started to think about, okay, how to get a pivot algorithm which uses consistent selection. It can be minimal index rule because that's the easiest to sell and formulate. But the really important is that you're choosing always the same element of the same possible set whenever you can do that.
That's similar to Bland's rule, right?
In the primal simplex case, that's what is referred to as Bland's rule. But even Blandis probably learned it from that combinatorial community when it was also published in the network flow problems and others. So Bland's rule is only for the primal or the dual simplex method.
Right.
Later I learned that he also tried to do it primal dual, but he was not successful, or I beat him for a few years. So finally I got to this, okay, let's get to this consistent selection. The simplest case is a minimal index rule. and essentially try to prove it, that it's finite. Obviously, a few times failed. I even didn't dare to tell to my supervisor that's what I'm doing until I succeeded. At a certain point, I got to the last missing part. And then I told him that, okay, I have it. And he didn't want it to believe. So I had to prove him in 2 different weeks, 3 different days, multiple times, while he got confident that everything is correct on that. So I really built on all of these things, that the desire to have this alternative primal dual pivots, the consistent selection rules coming from multiple combinatorial algorithms, including the minimal index rule published by Bland for the linear optimization primal dual simplex method, and put everything together. And because I liked the name criss-cross, what Science was giving to his, let's say, not so good algorithm, but that's where the idea was coming, that you should alternate with a certain rule for that. So I borrowed the name from there. And I met Science much later when I was already in Canada. I invited him because he was in Buffalo, just an hour drive from Hamilton. So we met in 2001, first time, much later. So that's just come to the criss-cross algorithm, but it's a very combinatorial rule. It's the simplest. You don't need 2-phase. You can start with any basis,
which is really cool.
You have only, let's say, just what we call primal and dual admissible pivots, as we called it with my friend Komei Fukuda later. Use this very simple rule, and then you prove finiteness. And then if you want to have primal simplex or dual simplex, you are specializing it, that if you happen to have a primal or dual feasible basis beyond this minimal index consistent selection rule, you just develop the ratio test, and then you are having in half an hour time the primal simplex, and another half an hour time the dual simplex method. So that's what I'm teaching, and some of my friends are teaching linear programming. It's beautifully elegant. It's also interesting. It's also finite for oriented matroid programming, which was very popular in the 70s, 80s. Friends, Bob Bland was doing things, Jack Edmonds and Komei Fukuda in Waterloo was a competition between these groups. Okay, who can get a better algorithm? It happened to be that I was the winner without knowing it. I did it first the linear case and then generalized to oriented matroids, and that variant of the criss-cross method got published in the Journal of Combinatorial Theory B. And the editor-in-chief of that time was Bill Pullyblank. We never met at that time. We met much later, but I still consider him as a good friend who helped me a lot to get that paper published in that super prestigious combinatorics journal on that. So this is the beautiful part. It's wonderful for teaching, interesting also intellectually. The negative part of it is it's not going to be practically useful. At least I have no idea who could be particularly useful. So simply the number of pivots is much higher than in a practical version of primal or dual simplex method, let's say, furnished with lots of heuristics.
Did you have the chance to meet Bland?
Yeah, I met him quite a number of times, obviously much later, because at that time I couldn't cross the Iron Curtain, especially not to the, to the US. Or at least, it was not totally impossible, but it was very complicated. And
you're going to talk about that too? Yeah.
So, but just as a side remark on that after when I was already in Holland, and he was hiring as a PhD director of the Cornell Ori department 2 of my last master students from Hungary.
Wow, what a story. Very nice. Tamás, Éva Tardos is a distinguished Hungarian mathematician known for her work in theoretical computer science, approximation algorithms, game theory, and more. You attended her PhD defense in 1984. At that time, was it already evident that she would become a superstar?
I think it's hard to really predict who will be a superstar, because it's besides the intellectual ability, it needs a lot of other things, perseverance and sometimes good luck, good judgment what to work with it. So Éva is a few years younger than me. She was really coming from the graph theory, more combinatoric side, while I was coming from the continuous optimization side. So he was in this combinatorics graph theory school, what Paul Erdős was the most prominent at the time. So I did know about her result at the time. That was a time when I already really started to well understood that how complexity theory is important, because that was not part of our operations research education at that time. So I learned everything after that. So I heard that she's highly talented. I've been at her PhD defense, just in the audience. And she definitely showed that she has great talent. I'm just always careful about predicting that who will be the superstar. But it was definitely that she's very good. That was
Yeah,
already.
right. You have a fantastic story involving Paul Erdős. Could you tell us how you first learned about Karmakar's algorithm from him in late 1984?
So far, I was working on like convex nonlinear optimization and then the criss-cross method generalized to combinatorial problems. In the meantime, I also learned about the ellipsoid method. So that's why I just mentioned that I already started to get interested in complexity theory. What does it mean? How to prove complexity of certain algorithms? One of my friends, Chris Rose, already started to work on to prove that the criss-cross method is exponential, just like the Clementi exam variant. So I was still more focusing on the pivot combinatorial part while moving already for the ellipsoid method. And I think it was in 1984, towards the end of the year, when Paul Erdős was visiting Hungary. He was coming to Hungary every year for a certain amount of time. And by that time, I already did know that how special he is. So when it was said, okay, he will give a seminar. So I went to the Met Institute and sat in the audience, and they said, take all of my courage to go to him after his presentation. And I started to tell him that, yeah, I'm doing all of this linear programming with the criss-cross algorithm, very combinatorial. So he was listening and just mentioned on the sideline that I'm also starting to work and interested in the ellipsoid method and the complexity of algorithms. And then he just mentioned, oh, but there's another guy, Karmakar. He just published a very different paper for linear programming. I'm just coming from a conference. He was giving a presentation, and I asked a copy for his slides. I'm not really understanding what he's exactly doing, but it seems to be very impactful. But I never travel with heavy luggages, so here are the transparencies. I can give it to you. And if you are interested, talk to Lovas because he has more. So I learned from Karmakar, from Paul Erdős in this discussion, and I actually got a copy of one of his presentations at that time. So I started to see what it is with my former supervisor, with my friends, started to try to look at, okay, what is the algorithm? What is the complexity of it? This looked very different at the time. And then I went to everybody like Lovas, Babai, so those who already traveled quite a bit to the West at the time. Maybe you have a technical report or something. So I started to get things. Then I got a few names. Then I started to write traditional letters to many people, including Mike Todd and and others, that maybe you can send me a technical report. And so I started to collect those. But Paul Erdős was really the starting point. That happened to be in a good time at the good place.
Yeah, and if you hadn't had the courage to go and approach him and talk to him, then probably your academic life would have been very different. Right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I can say that I had the courage, or I can say I was just ignorant and didn't even pay the attention that needs courage. But I definitely did, and did a few other times also in my life.
Yeah. And between 1984 and 1989, you worked mainly on pivotal algorithms and interior point methods. Could you highlight your main contributions to these topics?
So at that time, I was really working on generalizations and variants of the criss-cross algorithm. So for linear programming, quadratic programming, get variants of it, what the Hungarian method in assignment problem is known. So did variants of that. Also to pivot algorithms for all of these problems. And in the meantime, started to really work and deeper understand Karmakar's paper, started to, from this other technical reports, started to get something, okay, but there are also other variants of it. So I was always behind what I finally could get, because whenever I got something, I asked for more on that. Yeah. So really at that time, I didn't really publish on Ethiopian methods anything yet, except I wrote a paper in Hungarian to really summarizing and simplifying and presenting Karmakar's and some variants of it. So that was published in Hungarian only in the so-called Hungarian Journal of Applied Mathematics. Wrote also some paper about ellipsoid method, simplified many of the proofs. That's also another interesting story, submitted to a journal in Yugoslavia. At that time, they took a time to review it. In the meantime, I even left Hungary. It was published finally in 1998.
Are you kidding me?
Because, then came the war in Yugoslavia.
Right, exactly. Wow.
So,
10 years roughly or something like that, right?
yeah. So I even almost forgot about it when finally, once at the end of 90s, I got a copy of a journal where the paper was published with the original submission date.
Yeah. And traveling during the 80s must have been really difficult for you because of both political and financial reasons. How did you manage to attend conferences at that time?
Traveling was an adventure at the time, and the 1980s was when the system started to change. In the 70s, it was very difficult to get a passport which was eligible to go to the West. We had two kinds of passports: the blue to go to the West, the red to go to the socialist countries. So I started to go to visiting like East Germany, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, so where there was some kind of exchange agreement between the universities. And at the same time, I tried to go to Western countries, to university, because I've seen that like Erdős, Lovas, and others are going. So that's where I'm getting the more useful information on that. So almost I got some invitations, like from Portugal, but also from the oriented matroid programming criss-cross side on that. So that was it's a kind of huge experience at the time. But in the 80s, then first we could get a visa to go to out of Hungary through the Iron Curtain like once a year. Then it become like 3 times. So the technical legal side was easing. But on the other side, the university was giving zero funding for that. I started to get a little bit of money from this kind of invitation, like from Portugal, being also once in West Germany in Bonn. And any money I got, on one side, I put in an official account just to make sure that there is some money which I can prove that I have money to live on in the West if I give the legal permission to go. And also both on the black market, with the help of my stepfather of my wife, who did some trade job in a medical equipment company to buy, I'd say, illegally Western currency, which was needed to go there, because legally buying was not much. So I always could have enough money to survive, like to survive in 100 Deutschmark, which official exchange rate was like $50 on a week in Paris or some other countries. So I was writing to the organizers, like a Euro conference in Portugal, Euro conference, Euro Informs conference in Paris, other conference in Germany. That, okay, I would like to go, but I have absolutely no way to pay registration fee. Here is my abstract, what I've been talk about it. Here's a technical report or paper with it. If you invite me without paying anything, I will make sure that I will show up. And pretty much I got invitation for all of those conferences.
Yeah, they're very kind then.
I was very kind, very supportive, very good people. And one of them was, at that time, the second edition of the Euro Summer Institute. The European version of INFORMS, but that's really the association of the OR societies, not a single OR society. They started the summer program for young researchers. And they funded everything. They even give a little bit of travel support, also not necessarily sufficient, but everything there. And then it's a 3 weeks program. And they made sure that for every country, at most 2 people can come. And they try to get people from every country. So when I learned about it, then I said, okay, this is a great opportunity to get a more exposure what's happening in the West. Finally, my English might get good, because the summer school at that time was in Canterbury in that year. So I said, going to England, then I finally have to learn English in a proper way, not just in an elementary way. And I wrote an application for it. The interesting thing was that the topic of the summer school was decision-making in the uncertain world. The British OR Society is pretty applied, always much less theoretical than even INFORMS. So decision-making uncertain world. So I did linear programming in the oil refinery, but that doesn't look like fitting. I did criss-cross method. I did criss-cross method for quadratic programming. So I said, okay, that might be a good thing. So I wrote a nice application as much as I could, motivating that one of the most important problem in decision making in uncertain world is portfolio selection. And portfolio selection is a quadratic programming problem. And my purely theoretical combinatorial algorithm is solving this super important decision making problem in uncertain world.
Nice try.
I did my best. And for my big surprise and big pleasure, they invited me.
Well done then.
So I got to Canterbury. I said, obviously, the first shock was at the Heathrow airport because they were talking to me in English with an accent that I had really hard time to understand. But anyway, I got to Canterbury, and just this part of the story that I got in a young group of people. I think we were 34 or so altogether, from really every country, from Portugal to all the Western European countries, but also Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia. So made a lot of good friends. So in the program was, everybody was giving a talk, and then was discussions, and also cultural activities. And sometimes after a week or so, the head of the local organizers was inviting me particularly, especially for a dinner, just me. And said, that sounds great. We went to a local pub, had a good meal. I don't really like beer, but I'm sure I was drinking at least a big cup of British beer. Uh-huh. And towards the end of the meal, he was asking, why you are here? I looked at, why you are asking? I'm here because you invited me. I said, that's technically correct. I invited you, but this is decision making in a certain world. And you know that what you do is nothing to do with it. I said, yeah, I know, but I made my best effort to make a kind of credible pitch that I'm doing something relevant for that, because I really wanted to go, and explained to him also that, okay, how difficult it is to get out of Hungary. I really wanted to learn English in a proper way, and this is so far working fantastically good for me, even if I'm not doing stochastic on certain decisions. And then the guy said that, actually, we are on the same page. We understood that what you do is nothing to do with really the topic, but it was so interesting to read your pitch, to try to justify why we should invite you, that we said we can certainly afford to have one person outlier from the group who is not really in the core topic of this thing, but this person seems to be interesting enough to be worth to be here, and making the group also more lively and more interesting.
Yeah, again, another crazy story. It's just, every time I ask a question, I don't know what to expect. Always there is some unexpected turn. But so you met the one and only George Dantzig at an event that took place just after the Euro Summer Institute. How was the encounter?
No, it was actually during the Euro Summer Institute, because we had the 2 weeks program. There was every participants presenting and discussing topics and cultural and many other issues. So, and then the last week was of the Summer Institute to, let's say, participate in the British War Society's conference, which was held also in Canterbury, so that they combined the two and give us, in this way, free participation. That was the program for the 3rd week. And then when we got to there, then I learned that they invited George Dantzig to get the silver medal of the British War Society. That's their highest distinction or award, and Dantzig is coming.
So it's a silver medal, not a gold medal.
No, silver medal. I'm not sure why they call it silver, but there's also a gold medal in Europe.
I know.
That's the Euro gold medal.
Yeah.
But this is the British War Society. So I got super excited. Dantzig is coming, and I was still really expanding the criss-cross method also to other problems and complementarity, and also oriented me to complement other problems. But this is pivot, so Dantzig is the father of simplex method linear programming, so I want to tell him what I'm doing.
Fair enough.
So I talked with the local organizers that I want to talk him. I want to explain him what I'm doing. You know what I'm doing already, but I want to explain him. And they said first, no, that he's an old man. He was younger that time than I'm today. He's having jet lag. I had no idea what is jet lag, so I ignored that information. he has to rest and so on, and it's very packed program because many people. I said, I understand that, but I'm telling him something really special what he will be interested in it. Anyway, so after a bit of negotiation, I could reach that the local organizer said, okay, I have 15 minutes with him at a certain afternoon. And so they was introduced to Danzig, and that's just a slight remark that obviously his English was perfect grammatically, others, but he had a kind of hard to understand voice. It's like a bit of mumbling. So with my weak English, it was every sentence what he said was my guess of what he's saying. But anyway, I think I made pretty good guesses finally. But so I started to explain him what is the criss-cross method. I started to explain him, okay, what is the rules? Why is it no two-phase? It's still finite, and it's very elegant. And I know that many people wanted to do it for long, and I can prove you that it's finite. And then the guy was coming. 15 minutes is over.
Time's up.
Time is up. I have to take Professor Danzig. So I was a bit of, let's say, upset that I just started to to be in the I would say the mathematical details of what you're talking about. And for my big surprise, George was saying to the guy, "Come back in an hour. This young man is telling me something interesting." And in the next hour, I proved him finiteness and explained him also generalization. So he was extremely friendly and supportive in that he really interested and explained it. He even asked why I don't know about it. I said, I sent you a technical report. You have it. He was looking at me. Young man, I'm getting so much technical reports every week. I cannot tell you where all of those are ending up, but you have to learn that the world is not symmetric.
Yeah. But I mean, you should have been thrilled to have that moment with him.
Yeah, I was super excited and
yeah,
remembering pretty much every moment of it still.
Yeah, and it was all thanks to your persistence and nice pitch to convince the organizers to get you a seat there in the event and so on. So that's incredible. And did you have the chance to meet him on other occasions as well?
Yeah, a few years later, I met him at another conference. I would say that was more a bit of casual. Okay, I went also to him that, okay, Professor Danzig, we met recently. Young man, you have to tell me more. Then I explained, okay, I'm the criss-cross guy. I said, oh yeah, I remember. And he repeated that you have to learn that the world is not symmetric.
No, that's exactly what I thought.
I'm meeting so many people. I learned that many people remember me, but I just cannot remember everybody. That was another occasion. And the third occasion was that in January 1990, there was an InterPoint workshop organized in Asilomar in California. So when it's a good group of InterPoint people was coming together. So that time I was already really focusing InterPoint in the Netherlands, and that was also the first time when Hachian was coming out from the Soviet Union, and he also showed up. So for him that was the first time meeting Danzig.
Wow, what a great meeting.
So my colleague Case Rose was making a photo of them together, so I still have that photo.
Unbelievable. Yeah, so you saw that moment when they literally met.
Yeah. So Hachian was pretty much just straight coming from the Soviet Union, and after that took a faculty position at Rutgers.
Yes.
The other sad end of the story that was the chairful meeting first time, and then in 2005 both of them died in the same year.
Same year. 20 years ago roughly, and it's when I started really working in OR, so I remember distinctly. So why did you decide to leave Hungary and move to the Netherlands, and how did this transition happen?
So that's also, as everything has some history behind it. So I said that first I did convex optimization, then a lot of pivot algorithms, combinatorial extensions, started to work on ellipsoid method and Ethiopian methods, especially Ethiopian methods at the second part of the 1980s after I learned about it. So by the 88 roughly, I said, okay, I squeezed out most of the juice from the criss-cross algorithm and around. I'm returning back to more continuous, and the Karmarkar algorithm with the convex potential function approach looked very intriguing. So started to do more deep research on that. I didn't really publish anything else than just publish that Hungarian survey paper at that time. Other part of the story that Case Rose, my old friend and long-term colleague and collaborator, started coming to Hungary in the early 80s. And there was a winter conference in Hungary every other year in January in Mátrafüred. So he was coming almost all the time. First, he was super excited to learn about the criss-cross method. I mentioned already that he proved also exponential Kliminti example for it later. He was publishing at that time what he called the cone method, which turned out to be the UR simplex, but he rediscovered it in a different way. He was doing a lot of complexity theory. Actually, I learned from him that complexity theory as a subject exists. At the time, after Karmarkar's algorithm, he was coming also in, I don't remember the year, probably 86, to Hungary to give a kind of survey paper also about Karmarkar and Ethiopian methods at that winter conference. So we started to talk about, okay, we are both interested in Ethiopian methods. That's what we really want to do in the coming years. So we met very sporadically, but we kept sending regular mails to each other a few times a year, what we are doing and sending or results at that time. And then in the summer of 1988, was a INFORMS International Conference in Paris. So that's Case Rose was there. A lot of the Ethiopian people from Adler, Megiddo, Vial, Mike Todd, Wonderby, and many others were there. And in this arrangement, what I said, how to get creatively to conferences, I also got to that conference. So I got invitation for free. I just had to survive in my minimal Western currency at that time. So at that time, I met many of those people who sent me technical reports for Mike Todd and others, but also get together with Case Rose in person at the time and said, oh, this Ethiopian method is really exploding. It's really exciting. So we want to do it. And then he also said that he's alone in the Netherlands. Nobody else is interested. I also said, yeah, in Hungary, I'm pretty much alone. Obviously, my supervisor is interested, but he's not publishing in this area. And so from the discussion, at a certain point, I mentioned I would like to invite you, but I have no means in Hungary. I'm still an assistant professor, but it would be great to work together. And then he said, I might be able to invite you. Let me look around when we go home. And then he definitely made the work and effort and find that there is what's called a kind of research fellow. It's a kind of more than postdoc, but something similar, visiting professor for a year, pure research on that. So he arranged one of those positions for me. So by early 1989, it was clear that he has the background work. I obviously had to send applications and everything. So it got confirmed that I can go to the Netherlands and we can do the research together. And I tried to get to, let's say, longer-term Western visits, but I was always unsuccessful. In the same year, at the same time, I also got in Hungary a Soros scholarship. George Soros at that time was sponsoring a lot of Eastern Europeans to go to the Western Europe or the US. So my invitation was from Rutgers to Radkor, from Peter Hammer.
Not bad.
It's not bad. And also got a half-year scholarship from Hungary to go to Denmark. So for years, nothing. And then suddenly in the beginning of 1989, I had 3 opportunities and I had to choose on that. It was clear that in Denmark, although I had a few wonderful colleagues like Jakob Krarup, met him many times and also collaborated later to establish Europe and some other activities, but that's not really interesting professionally. Getting to the US, Radkor was a kind of on one way exciting. On the other side, looking at Radkor, there was discrete people, stochastic people, but nothing really did interpolation methods. Later, I learned actually that year they hired Dave Sheno, who did many of the implementation. But at the time when I looked around, he was not visible or not there. So on one side, professionally, I said, okay, actually the Dutch invitation from criss-cross Delft, that's the most attractive professionally, because I really can do what I want with a great colleague. We already had there's a lot of history to working together, and also not a highly paid job, but it was enough, and criss-cross made a lot of help to make arrangements for accommodation and others, that I can take my wife and my son with me on that. Just driving from Hungary to Holland.
Right.
No
How
need.
long did it take?
It's about 1,500 kilometers. At that time, I had a completely new East German Wartburg. So it's an East German car that was the first generation which got a Volkswagen Polo engine. So it was a kind of hybrid East-West car. But we put there's a lot of things what we thought it needed. Even we bought a small trailer behind. To put many things because we know that we will not have money enough to buy many things, so we took anything what we thought we can. So to get there was really 2 days at that time with that car and with that load on that. So we arrived on August 31st in the Netherlands. But in the next 10 years, because we stayed 10 years in the Netherlands, 10 years and 3 months to be more exact, we crossed from the Netherlands to Hungary to and back many times, and many times we did that 1,500 kilometers in one day.
Wow. Yeah. And was it easy to adapt to a new country and university?
That was our first long time going out of Hungary. Also for me, I've been like 3 weeks in England. I've been in the summer of '88 for 3 months in Austria, in Luxembourg. IASA, so the International Institute of Systems Analysis, which was an East-West collaboration, but that was very, very close by. That was not that. And obviously every country is different, so the Netherlands is much more different from Hungary than Austria.
Totally different.
So I was already speaking reasonably good English. My wife was, had a few weeks course just that summer, the same way as my son, who was 8 years old at that time. So adapting to the local culture, also it was exciting to be in the Netherlands, to see, let's say, completely different country, different culture. It was, on the other side, very hard. I would say it was even harder for my wife and son than for me, especially in at least the first year, because they had to learn some communication locally. My son was put in a local school without speaking a word in Dutch. Had some wonderful teacher in that small school, Lisbeth, and was really helping him a lot. But it was still very hard to be in an environment with a lot of kids who were not understanding what he was doing, and he was not understanding what they are doing on that. But he was swimming, so in a local swimming pool he was integrating quite well, and we had some good friends who were still keeping friendship with those parents even today. On the university side, I had some really interesting stories that just like criss-cross was teaching linear programming based on the criss-cross method. So the local students, master PhD students, were learning in their lower undergraduate layers the criss-cross method. They learned my name about it, and then it was announced that I'm there. So in the first few weeks, it happened that some of the master students, they stopped me and asked if I'm really that person who did the criss-cross method, would I learn? And I said, smiling, yeah, sure, I'm that person. And they said, it's hard to believe, because everyone else, what they learned from textbooks and the classes, especially in the undergraduate classes, it's either very old or died even a century ago. It's hard to see a young person who they learned about it.
That was a compliment.
That was a huge compliment.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. And after 1 year, in September 1990, you received an offer to become an assistant professor at TU Delft, but you had to learn Dutch in 4 months to teach a course in January 1991. How did you manage that?
It was around May, June towards the end of the first year when they approached me, actually they liked me too. We really did a wonderful research time with Kees Roos and Dick Den Hertog, who started the PhD in the same day when I started my visiting position. So it was highly productive and very enjoyable. So Kees arranged that, okay, we can extend it, transfer you to at least for a temporary 5-year contract assistant professor position. I was super excited. Yeah, then we can keep continuing everything what we are doing. By the time family also started to settle a little bit, although it was still very hard for them. But this was a kind of unprecedented opportunity. And by that time also Hungary changed. I mean, that way that that time they allowed to be away from your Hungarian job for 5 years maximum. So that was pretty much fitting in it. So I said, yeah, sure. I would love to do it, and I will arrange that to be away absent from Hungary, not losing even the job, neither me nor my wife. And the sideline, they mentioned that, okay, with this job, you will have to teach in Dutch, but we will help. Okay, so I was, let's say, probably too careless to clarify what that means. So we kept writing papers. We went in July to Hungary for a holiday and got back. Then the local people were saying, okay, 1st of September, an intensive language course starts. It's essentially all the morning, all the afternoon, 2 sessions, and what they call the Delft method to learn language, which essentially you learn language like a baby. You memorize everything. And then in the second semester, you have to teach in Dutch. Then I said, I was always horribly bad in languages. I learned Russian for 13 years and barely ever learned. I really suffered to learn English in a decent way. This is an interesting proposition that I will learn Dutch in 4 months and then we'll teach in Dutch undergraduate calculus in the 5th month. But I said, okay, this is the job, then I have to do it. And in the meantime, I still didn't want it to completely absent for doing research. So with Kees Roos, we was commuting every day for a half an hour to hour long drive. We shared drive. We lived in the same small town where he arranged originally. So, and he was speaking Dutch also in the car with me. So that was part of the intensive course. So I never been so tired in my life than having like 6-7 hours Dutch class in the day and then having another 20-25 pages to learn laterally. Not very tiny letters, but still a lot of text what you had to learn laterally. And listen to that also in cassettes and VHS tapes, but mostly cassettes. Mm-hmm. So put up the headphone and then memorize the text because every day was a test.
Yeah, very exhausting. I can imagine. Yeah.
Essentially, the simple computer program put up a part of the test, leaving out some words, and you had to put it in laterally. So if you missed, let's say, more than 1 in 5, then the computer shut down and said, go back to study and you can come again in a half an hour time. And you couldn't go home until you passed the daily test. So it was, let's say, brutal, but finally I made it. So in the 5th month, I started to teach. In the 3rd month, I also realized that some of the students in the Dutch class will be my students, what I have to teach in 2 months' time. So I cannot fail this.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, my Dutch was not perfect, but it was understandable. But some of the local students in the end of the 1st month started to, let's say, complain to the class coordinator because this undergraduate calculus, like 12 groups get the same lecture, same exercises from different teachers. And there was one coordinator who gave the exams and assignments. Everybody has to get the same exams. So complain to the group coordinator that this guy is not able to teach in Dutch. But that guy was also very, let's say, supportive, helpful. So he said, talking to me, said that this is the complaint and so on. But he also said, I don't really have trouble to understand you. So sure, it's not perfect Dutch, but but he said, okay, next week he's coming in one of my classes. I just sit on the back of the class and I have to stop 5 minutes early in the class because he wants to talk to the class, or 10 minutes early. I don't remember the exact time. So anyway, I give my class. He was sitting peacefully at the back, was coming in front when time was coming, and then asked the group, what do you think about the guy's teaching? First a bit of silence, then they started to say first more carefully, then more explicitly that no, we don't understand this guy. His Dutch is not good. And then he listened to the complaints and they said, I was sitting at the back. It's clear that he's not speaking perfect Dutch. You just have to understand he started to learn less than 5 months ago. But I understood everything. If you have trouble, that's your mathematics, not his Dutch. And he left.
Yeah, so you survived those protests in the end.
Yeah.
And have you ever considered returning to Hungary?
In the mid-90s, 94 or so, it was an opportunity, and actually I was appointed the head of the Operations Research Department. It was funded just 10 years before on that.
How come? You were not even there.
I was not even there, but let's say, in this weird arrangement that I was on a 5 years leave. I still had my job.
Okay.
My job there. So anyway, it's a long story, so I don't want to go too much into details. But I got appointed, so at that time I was really seriously considering, but they did it at the end of the summer. And then I went home, driving 14 hours.
Yeah.
Told everybody that, that's a great honor and I intend to do it, but I cannot do it right now. My son is in the school next year, getting the age that can go to 6 years high school instead of normal 4 years. So family and other reasons, I can take the job next summer. Everybody agreed on it, so I was really planning to go back to Hungary the next summer, but I would say bad local politics. Get too much details. By the time I drove back to the Netherlands, I was fired because I didn't show up in the first birthday in Hungary. So the dean who I talked to at that time, he just was, that's it, very incorrect. So he was talking to me, agreed with everything, and 3 days later he fired me because I was not there.
Yeah.
Anyway. That went quite long to and back up to the rector magnificus of the university, and they reinstalled me and so on. But after that, I said that this is not really what I really want to do. So finally, I didn't show up, and
All right.
I resigned in Budapest next year.
Yeah. And during your time at TU Delft, you had many illustrious visitors. Could you mention some of them?
Yeah, so we really had a fantastic time in Delft. So with criss-cross and first Dick den Hertog, so we had really great PhD students. In the interpoint side, we had most of the people who had a good name showed up. There's at least a conference, but also long-term visitors. We had like Clovis Gonzaga was there for a year.
From Brazil, yeah.
From Brazil.
He sadly died not so long ago. Yeah.
2 years ago or 3 years ago by now.
Yeah, I really regret. I should have interviewed him, but I had no idea that he was ill or, it was, But,
he was a fantastic guy. So
yeah, I know. Yeah.
We had really good time together, and also his wife and my wife was also really liking each other. Even I think we met last time in Berlin in 2019, the ICCOPT conference.
Mm-hmm.
And then Arkady Nemirovsky was there for also a year, so that's when he essentially wrote the first version of the book what he wrote with the Bental, the convex optimization applications. We had Bental visiting also for a year, Kurt Anstreicher, Osman Güler, and also shorter-term visitors, many of them like Takashi Tsuchiya, Mike Todd, and many, many more. So,
and even postdocs like Erling Andersen.
Okay, so these were really the visitors. So I said that we have fantastically good PhD students, also Dick den Hertog, Benjamin Janssen, both of them, Etienne de Klerk, their PhD thesis become published as a book. And also we had Erling Andersson as a postdoctoral fellow. He essentially had a similar appointment what I had in the first year. That was the time when he finished his PhD, technically in Germany, but most of the work research was done by the DNUE in Iowa. And by the time he also had a version of what later became MOSEC.
Yes.
But at that time was part of the ExpressMP software package. So he was there. So we had really fantastic time. We had good papers on low rank updates, how to implement interpolation methods for second order cone optimization. So that's where he really developed the fuller version of not just the linear version of MOSEC, but all the conic version. Developed also the good understanding of second order semi-definite. All of this is working together. Collaborated also with the PhD student at that time, Jiming Peng. So he stayed in Delft for another 10 months after I left to Canada, but so most of the things was really started when we were there. So that was really, at that time, I would say, a focal point of all the interior point research, and many people were coming in different...
That's like Mecca of interior point
Right.
methods. Yeah.
And obviously, I didn't mention Jean-Philippe Vial, who was even collaborating with QCOL even before I did know him. So he was coming every year multiple times. In the meantime, Nesterov was hired in Belgium.
Belgium, yeah.
So obviously, he was coming over.
From Louvain-la-Neuve.
Louvain-la-Neuve, yeah. Jean-Louis Goffin from Canada, but originally Belgian. He was also coming many times.
Yeah, you really had a constellation of stars there. You also have a nice anecdote involving subject to guest Martin Grötschel. Would you mind sharing it?
Martin Grötschel, that I hope he forgives me if I'm telling it, but I didn't know him from the 80s, so when I visited Bonn and Germany, and also had very good connections. Met also a few times by the time already with Karl-Heinz Borgwardt, who wrote a book and developed the probabilistic expected number of pivot steps of the simplex algorithm. So at that time I don't remember the exact year, it was probably 90, I don't remember when the German unification actually happened. I forgot that year. So both Martin Grötschel and Borgwardt was in Augsburg at that time. So they jointly invited me for different reasons. Martin is more in the combinatorial pivot side, but interested in complexity of interior point methods. Karl-Heinz is coming from the expected number of steps, or they started to think about the expected number of interior point iterations. So anyway, so I visited them, and by the time the ZIB was already established, but the capital was still in Bonn. Of the United Germany. And Martin was already appointed as the to-be deputy director of ZIB. So he was already planning to move. He was looking housing in Berlin. And at a certain point, a certain day of my visit, he was a kind of running around on the corridor, looked like very agitated and unhappy. What's going on? I said, Kohl, the chancellor at that time, was just announcing that we are moving the capital to Berlin. And I lost today at least 100,000 Deutschmark.
Yeah.
At the time, Deutschmark, because the housing prices skyrocketed. He was already negotiating something to buy, and said, tomorrow, if I return to the negotiating table, it's 100,000 more. So I was very upset in that guy should have waited at least a few more weeks. He was very happy that the capital moves to Berlin in general. Timing.
Yeah, very frustrating for him. And that's a nice story, by the way. And what were your main research contributions while you were at TU Delft?
Most of the research was really around the interior point methods. So we developed new variants for mostly path-following interior point methods, target-following interior point methods, short and large update. Get other, I'd say, non-standard variants, but generalized to linear complementarity problems with P-star kappa matrices, generalized to convex optimization problems with the self-concordancy condition, proved for many classes of problems. That's when also my master PhD thesis was coming a good thing. So we have proved that primal dual problems of geometric programming, LP programming are solvable in polynomial time. So proved some key lemmas there. So most of the research was really around the interior point methods and get much beyond the linear programming at that time. But there was many other funny projects that, like, we optimized nuclear reactor reloading patterns with the research reactor nuclear physics people in Delft. That's one of the papers which was published within 2 weeks after submission. We never got such fast publication in the mathematics world on that. Did also frequency assignment problems, so integer, more combinatorial problems with interior point method techniques. That's also something we have enhanced the variant what partly Karmarkar was also working on it at that time, solving non-convex quadratic problems. And that did also work with Philips on magnetic resonance imaging and other technology-related optimization problems with some masters, some PhD students. So it was really a very productive time, not only doing interior point methods, although that was really the core of it, but also doing a lot of applied work.
Very nice. In 1996, the book Interior Point Methods of Mathematical Programming was published with you as an editor. What's the importance of this book?
Karmarkar was coming in 84. I said everything exploded towards the end of 80s. So in the early 90s, like 3,000 papers was published a year in interior point methods. But the mid 90s, it was already clear that there are still a lot to do, but probably the most fundamental things are already done. And at that time was lacking any serious book. There was a few books, but they were not, I would say, very high quality, very comprehensive. So this is, it's really time to get something more comprehensive published. And with criss-cross and VL already was working on the book Interior Point Methods for Linear Optimization, which first was published by Wiley and then later republished by Springer. But that was a long-term project to write a book. So we come to the idea with talking with John Martindale, Kruger editor at that time, that how can we get the book out relatively quickly, which is comprehensive. So that's come the idea that, okay, let's try to invite the best people from the different areas. So essentially set up the structure, what topics, what chapters should be, and then get that book published in less than a year time.
Wow, yet another of your great contributions, and in this case it was relatively fast. Yeah, so I'm really impressed by that. You founded the journal Optimization and Engineering, an international multidisciplinary journal promoting optimization theory and its applications in engineering sciences. What's the story behind its creation?
As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we had a lot of engineering problems with Philips, with Shell, with the nuclear people, with the military and frequency assignment. So, and I was teaching engineers also in general. So got in Delft much more exposed to the engineering optimization work than ever in Hungary, except working in oil refinery. So on one side, that was that there's a lot of engineering optimization problems on that. And then after the successful publication of the edited book, what we just discussed, continued discussions with John Martindale and some other colleagues that is there any space for other optimization journals? Even some people said I should start a journal of interior point methods. I said that's maybe an interesting idea at this point, but there's no journal of simplex methods, so I don't think interior point methods would be a more appealing proposition. But I said there's so much optimization problems, and if I'm looking at papers from engineering side, they use a lot of optimization, but frequently not the best possible. And if I'm looking at the mathematical papers, even if they claim in any of the optimization journals that there's a real engineering application, it's typically just a classroom example on that. So there's a kind of gap in both sides. And then okay, why not to start a journal which is really aiming to be linking the two communities, and it has to be rigorous on both sides. At least has to be really novel on one side, but has to be rigorous on the other side. So until very recently, the journal was doing for 20-some years that every paper was assigned to an engineer and a mathematical optimization person as an editor, and reviewing went on both sides. And the editor-in-chief had the fun if the recommendation from the two sides was different. But that journal, we got a really good editorial board, so that took me more than a year to, let's say, convince many people that this is a worthy project. I never heard anyone said that it was not after that, so it was really successful. It got a really good reputation and name in the engineering communities, but the optimization community also really appreciates it, but not as much as many of the engineering, aerospace, civil engineering community, to get really the interface between them. So everybody's talking about multidisciplinary, but doing it really, that's much harder than just talking about.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
So I funded that, organized the editorial board, set up the procedures, and was the editor-in-chief for 13 years, I think, 14 years almost. And the journal is doing very well, even today.
Tamás, you seem to have been well established in the Netherlands. What made you leave to Canada in 1999?
That was not really a planned, definitely not a long planned move. So by the time we were very well settled, my son was 99 finishing high school. By the time he speak perfect Dutch with a local accent, actually better than any Dutch because he learned also the rules and kept it. So on one side, just starting from there, family-wise, that was a kind of possible point, not breaking my son's school time. But it really just happened that one of our visitors in the previous year, what I didn't mention, Tom Luo, was already a professor at McMaster University in the electrical computer engineering department. And they funded a new department called computing and software at the time, which is a kind of combination of computer science, software engineering, as the electrical computer engineers doing. And they also realized that optimization is an important topic in that area. But not every that kind of computer science department has many optimization programs. Many of them have, but not all. So they wanted to be build that also as an important topic and looking for some senior person who, let's say, can signify and can really build it. And Tom Luo was making the connection at the time as previously visiting us in Delft that, okay, this is a great opportunity. And let's say he convinced me to apply. Actually, in that time, which is very unusual in the Netherlands, I was set up for a year sabbatical to go to Tokyo to visit Masako Kojima and Tokyo Institute of Technology. But so this opportunity come, after a bit of discussing with my wife and son, I would say my son was more enthusiastic about the move than my wife. But finally we agreed that, okay, if I'm getting a good offer, then we explore this. And got the job. I canceled the Tokyo sabbatical because it was a new department. It was just said, probably I can make a bigger impact, more influence, how to develop and how to grow if I'm not waiting for another year on that. So that's just a bit of short, interesting story. The opportunity come to me, not I was looking extensively to go to somewhere.
So off you went to McMaster University in Ontario, in Canada. So during that transition period, you also co-founded the Euro Working Group on Continuous Optimization in 2000. Could you tell us more about that?
So this was a project started in Europe when I was there, but finished by the time I was in Canada. Europe was very important for me, as I mentioned, the Euro subminister in Canterbury. So I kept a really good heart for that. And mentioned also Jakob Krarup in Denmark, who I almost visited for a half year, but instead went to the Netherlands. And that time he was very active also in Europe. So with him, with my, let's say, only PhD students from Hungary, Tibor Illés, in different settings, we started to talk that there are other working groups in Europe, like discrete optimization already too, but there's nothing in continuous optimization. So that discussion led to that actually we should fund one. And in the year 2000 also the Euro conference was in Budapest. So my Hungarian student and other colleagues were organizing with me together an interpoint method workshop in front of it, what we tagged also as the funding workshop of the Euro continuous optimization working group. And with a few iterations, it became Europe as the name. First we said COWG, but Jakob Krarup said that no, that's not appropriate because how to pronounce it, COWG, like a cow? No, we are not cows, we are optimizers. So this is it born. So I was the first chair of it. By now it's having the annual conferences with about 300, 250 people, so very successful. So I'm really happy that it flourished much beyond what I originally even hoped for.
Yeah, I should be proud of that. And around that same period, you founded the MOPTA conference in 2000, right?
So MOPTA conference that, again, started to be as a kind of my startup package workshop to let the world know that I'm left the Netherlands. So I arrived to McMaster University. So it started first as a small workshop in the year 2000, but we had wonderful people from Wagner by Kojima and many other interpoint people. And MIT, Bert Zekas was coming. So we had really fantastic speakers. My startup package was expanded that after that by the dean, that this is so good for the university, what you need to repeat it. So that was the expansion of the startup package. And then it could become a multi-year workshop, and by now for 25 years, 26 years, it's happening every year. Until 2008, it was in Canada. Since then, it's always at Lehigh.
Yes. You were awarded the Canada Research Chair in Optimization in 2001, and in 2004, you founded the School of Computational Science and Engineering. What motivated you to do so?
So the Canada researcher was a more kind of recognition that what I'm doing, and it's a national endowed chair-like position with special funding and title. That was a great honor to be. So I had that until I left to Lehigh in 2008. School of Computer Engineering and Science was more a natural extension for continuation of the Journal of Optimization and Engineering. So because engineering and optimization, obviously both of them use a lot of computation on that. So once I'd combining all of those topics, combining with the enhanced power of computers, because in the 1960s there was a lot of engineering programs which had optimization math programming courses, which most of them died out in the meantime, because the 60s the computers was not that powerful to solve real engineering problems. But by the 2000s it became clear that that's really a powerful technology, this combination. And the other one is that interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary is a nice slogan, but when it's getting a reality, then it's hard to do. So many of the engineering departments had faculty who had no engineering degree. Like myself, never had a computer science or software engineering degree, and they not even have an engineering degree. But the physics department had applied math people for all of the large-scale simulations, what they do. So departments hire faculty without typical background, but they didn't have the ability to enroll PhD students with that background. And everybody was saying, as I talked around the university, that, okay, why I cannot hire a person as a PhD student in my department with the degree what I had. And then that discussion led to, okay, let's make it a graduate program, computational engineering and science, with a school, with an academic unit, owning the graduate programs, not owning any faculty. Everybody is an associate member. We had 53 members at the time. And that was unique in Canada. I think there is another one, similar profile by now, but still unique. Just after I left, the director became someone from the math department. And then the two deans agreed that they flipped the name from engineering and science to science and engineering. So today the name of the school is Computational Science and Engineering.
All right. Politics.
Local politics, local preferences.
Yeah.
Is having some lag.
Yeah, I understand. Tamás, you kept on founding events in 2004, including the Vocal Optimization Conference and ICCOPT, which is the International Conference on Continuous Optimization. Again, what inspired you to create these initiatives?
Okay, so the VOCA conference that is a kind of reconstruction in a very different way. Those winter conferences, what was in the 70s, 80s, where I also first met Case Rose. But those conferences got stopped sometimes in the early 90s. And so I was talking with some Hungarian colleagues, especially Ferenc Friedler, who was at the time the dean of the computer science informatics faculty in Veszprém, that was a very valuable conference. How can we recreate it in a different way, obviously, so there's different characteristics. And then talked with the Hungarian Operations Research Society people. So they said that they will try to make everything possible local organization, but they need me to get the scientific organization and have the high-profile people. So just like in MOFTA, we had every year a few very high-profile persons, starting from Nesterov to Katja Scheinberg to many others in the years, and the conference is still going on. That's in every other year structure. So by now it's not even in that same university. But the good thing is creating the things that it's not just a few events. All of them has very long life and long history by now. So the ICCOPT was a different thing, but in a way similar. We were at the ISMP meeting in Copenhagen in 2003, if I remember well the exact year, and with Jean-Philippe Vial commuting from Copenhagen to Lyngby, where the conference was, on the suburban train, and discussed that, yeah, we have ISMP, and we are having the SIAM Optimization Conference, but there's the third year, because each of them is there once in 3 years, but the third year is blank for the Continuous Optimization Society. So this is, we agreed on the train that, okay, actually we should fund another conference series, what become International Conference Continuous Optimization. So at that conference, we had called 2 days later in a kind of lunchtime town hall meeting. Okay, this is what we want to do. By the time we talked with the leadership of the Math Optimization Society, Math Programming Society at that time. And they said, if people wants to do it, then we will make it happen. So pretty much everybody at that lunch meeting was very enthusiastic. We would like to have it. And then decision was made very quickly. So we recruited Zhongxi Peng. At the time, he was at RPI to organize the first conference. That was with about 230 people. And then with Jean-Philippe, we were the steering committee at the time. So I said, I'm resigning. I want to make the next one. So in 2007, organized the second one at McMaster, combined with MOPTA at that time. And ICCOPT is now a very well-established triennial conference.
Yes. I mean, it's just too many contributions. And I have to ask you about your contributions while you were in Canada. Could you comment on your most relevant research?
I said the most fun part is really with my friends Anton Deza, Yuzinchenko, and some PhD students at the time, is the Kliminti example for Inti-Opay methods.
It's famous for the simplex method, right?
Same Kliminti cube. But obviously, simplex method goes from basis to basis, or vertex to vertex, because that's a non-degenerate problem. But Inti-Opay methods goes in the interior. So by the time I didn't know that, okay, if I add the redundant constraints, so understood very well how the central pass behaves. So if we add redundant constraints on one side of the polyhedron, then it's pushing the central pass to the other. So the question was, okay, what is on one side, the worst case, a kind of worst case structure for Inti-Opay methods? And on the other side, if we can somehow squeeze out that the square root n log 1 over epsilon complexity is tight or not. So this is what we were trying to look at that. And I said, okay, the Kliminti example is well known. You have all of this, let's say, slightly perturbed faces of it. So if we add structurally redundant constraints to it, then that was the initial hope, I would say, that we are winding up the central pass that is going along the same path in the interior, what the simplex method does. So actually that's what we did, and we wrote several papers about it. First construction was not the tightest one. Then we get tighter and tighter constructions. We had tighter constructions when some of those redundant constraints touching the feasible set. And that gave the Kliminti example for Inti-Opay methods also proved that you cannot really improve the complexity of Inti-Opay methods as long as they follow the central path, because the number of almost linear pieces there with almost 90 degrees turns, where you have to make at least 1 Newton step. That's exactly the same number of steps as in the simplex method. Many people say that this is theoretically contradictory because polynomial and exponential in the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But there's no contradiction because we are adding exponentially many redundant constraints, and the complexity depends on the number of inequalities, number of constraints, not in the dimension of the problem where that dual form problem plays on that. That was probably the most fun part research-wise in Canada. We had many other things. That's where I started to work also radiation therapy treatment optimization with some of my students at Yuzinchenko, and collaboration with the Princess Margit Hospital, did VLSI design optimization with some of the colleagues, electrical engineers and computer science. But that's really the Kliminti example, what really stands out as a most fun project.
All right. You have an interesting story regarding the ISMP conference in Rio in 2006, but actually not related to the conference directly.
Yeah, so the Rio 2006 was after 9/11, so the US and Brazil was a kind of not friendly relations because of the fingerprinting in the US, and the Brazilians started to fingerprint with the blue ink on that. So anyway, so the ISMP was in Rio, so I was a professor at the time in Canada, and then at that time we still called by phone the travel agent that, okay, this is where I want to go, this is the time where I want to go, buy me a plane ticket, and then this is where I would like to get in a hotel. So the lady understood what I want and then started to search, and then said that, okay, yeah, but just be careful, because if you go to Brazil, then you will need a visa. And I said, I'm not sure, but I'm not a Canadian. And then she said, okay, but if you're not a Canadian, then you have to be very careful because they are making fingerprinting for you with the dirty ink, because every American is fingerprinted. And I said, but I'm also not an American. So at that time, I was still not American, not Canadian. At that time, I had a Dutch and Hungarian passport. So only 2 nationalities at that time. So then she was pausing for a second and I said, okay, if you're not Canadian, not American, then who you are.
Come on.
Then I said, okay, I have Hungarian and Dutch. Let's make fun. So I'm telling her that I'm Hungarian. I'm sparing the Dutch for later if needed.
Okay.
I didn't tell both. So I said, I'm Hungarian. Then she said, okay, Hungarian. And there was a quite, let's say, a long time for silence. And then I heard that she's, let's say, flipping papers and checking things. And after a while I said, I cannot believe it. As a Hungarian, you don't need a visa and they don't fingerprint you. I said, thank you, that's my privilege.
Yes, and I went to Hungary in 2018 and I didn't need the visa also. So yeah, very interesting. Certainly it was an advantage to be Hungarian, right? Yeah, for traveling.
So sometimes the advantage is to have multiple passports.
Yeah, I know. You stayed in Canada for almost 9 years, and again, things seem to be going well. What brought you to Pennsylvania?
It's a bit of similar than going to Canada from the Netherlands. So when everything is settled, I was really having great time in Canada. Funded all of these conferences, conference series. Europe had also a big Canadian project through MITACS for mathematical optimization methods and use of them in electrical engineering and then there are the other areas. So really very quickly grown into the Canadian Mathematical Optimization Society. Even by the time I had the highest answer grant in Canada in the operations research area. So I really did very well. Canada was a great place to be. But in 2007, when we had organizing the ICCOPT conference, jointly with the MOPTA conference at McMaster. So we were fully geared up. So the first edition had about 230 participants. We hope to have about 500 as the second edition. So get a lot of collaboration with the Fields Institute. They also supported the conference in many ways. So everything was gearing up. And sometimes in May, I got a phone call from Bob Storr from Lehigh University that he has a proposition to me because they are looking for a department chair. And people were suggesting me, actually I met him already before that at some INFORMS conference, so I didn't know him also in person, but I had no idea where Lehigh University is and much less even about the departments. But anyway, so he tried to convince me that they need a department chair and I should apply for it. And I said, it will be hard to convince my wife to change country again. We already the third country where we live forever. And on the top of it, I have this big conference, which really has to be a success because there's a series what I co-funded with Jean-Philippe Vial, and we'll be about 500 people. So I'm not even having time to think about it. So we had a good discussion and they said, okay, I understand. So I started to forget about it. And when the ICCOPT conference was over in August, he called again, the conference is over, now you have time to think. We have time to think about this opportunity to be our department chair. I said, I almost forget about it, but okay, no, let's explain what it really is. So we had a discussion. So I went home to told my wife that, okay, I told her also the first attempt, but I said, okay, they seem to be really serious about it. So if they, okay, why not to explore? I might say that she was not very happy with the opportunity. But anyway, so after a bit of discussion, I said, okay, actually, we have no idea where is Lehigh. So we found out that it's in Bethlehem. Okay, where is Bethlehem? Okay, actually, we found, okay, this is a driving distance. It's just about 650 kilometers from Hamilton, with the experience of driving across Europe from Holland to Hungary many times. So we said, okay, we actually can just go there for a weekend and look around. So when Bob Storr was calling again, then I said, okay, I'm still not sure, but I at least got with my wife that, okay, let me go down in the second week of September because I will be on sabbatical. So I'm a bit of flexible for a long weekend, look around, and then we'll see what it is. And then they said, oh, wonderful. And let me make some arrangements. Obviously, we are paying for that trip. Saying so they made arrangements that they give me kind of full interview schedule, talking with the department, giving a seminar, talking to the dean, tour on campus. And at the same time, they also hired a real estate agent to give a tour for my wife in the neighborhood where possible to live and all of these things. So to get to the short to the end, and after this visit, we got home and discussed, okay, let's try. And then the let's try was that finally I got an offer. We had a interesting negotiation, but finally they give me an offer, but it was pretty much impossible to reject. And then in 2008, we showed up at Lehigh.
Wow. I mean, you really know how to get out of your comfort zone. Yes. And could you talk about your research on interior point methods and mixed integer second-order conic optimization that you developed at Lehigh University?
So I said that in Canada, we did a lot of research. Part of them was like mixed integer or integer like VLSI design or applications optimization in electrical engineering. On the interior point side, we did a lot of things and extended the interior point method by the time for second-order conic semi-definite. And I would say most of the real novelty was already covered by that time. Obviously, we can start write hundreds of papers, but nothing will be that impactful as the papers in 1990 was thought. But mixed integer nonlinear was picking up. And then we still started the discussion when I was still in Canada before moving. Actually invited also Pietro Bellotti, who was more on the integer side and was known that he will coming for a kind of 2 years visiting position to Lehigh. And my PhD student graduated in 2007 and was a postdoc with me for a year, Imre Pólik. So we started to talk about, okay, why not to do try mixed integer second-order conic before we go to the mixed integer semi-definite on that. So that's just the discussion started. And then I say all the team with a new PhD student, Julio Goes, come together at Lehigh. And then we had a really good time for the next 4 or 5 years. But Pietro and Imre was with us only for 2 years, but the collaboration still continued to develop what we call the disjunctive conic cuts. So instead of linear cuts, like Gomori cuts or Bender's cuts, then giving second-order conic cuts to mixed integer second-order conic optimization problems. So tightening the continuous formulation towards getting integer solutions. So the complete methodology with proving everything what need to be and can be proved for this mixed integer. So that was really a fun, really very good project. So I think will be very useful as mixed integer second-order conic getting more broadly implemented in software packages.
Yeah. Was this an extension of Balas' work?
Balas never did anything second-order conic, but
I know, but
he did a lot of disjunctive cuts. So definitely relates to, in a way, it's a generalization of that to that kind of cuts to second-order conic optimization. So that's why you also use the disjunctive because of that connection.
Yeah. In 2017, you and your team won the Wagner Prize and an IISc award for solving a real-life inmate assignment and scheduling problem. You took optimization to prisons. So could you briefly comment on this fascinating project?
Okay, there's definitely a fascinating project, and it's a unique project, and it's still a unique project. So it really started as a university research project, initiated the contact by people from the Pennsylvania Department of Correction. They had a problem how to assign inmates to the many prisons and prison units in the correctional system, and there are very good rules, rule of thumbs and common sense rules. So it's essentially an assignment problem with more than 100 side constraints. I mean, 100 different kinds of side constraints. The actual number is really in the tens of thousands on that. So when they approached me, then I said, okay, I think we can do that because it looks like a crew assignment problem on that. There's an assignment problem with specific side constraints. And it was a kind of 5 years long university research project with colleagues and Mohammed Shafa, my PhD students, the lead PhD students working on it. And finally, a university research project ended up of software product what they started to use. So they started to use, so we applied for the Wagner Prize and the Outstanding Innovation Service Systems Engineering Award for INFORMS and IISc respectively. We got both on that. And then the students graduated, Mohammed as a PhD student, Anshu Sharma as a master student. And then we said, the Pennsylvania people, project is over, great success, we got lots of recognition, now you own the results. And then they said, oh, that's not that simple, because we really started to use it and we even lost some capability to do it without this software, without this project. So to say shortly, then after a bit of discussion, negotiation with my students, we founded a company called Optamo, who is really specializing to optimizing operations in prison systems. So by now the company is having 5 employees doing work in Pennsylvania, Georgia, getting it to Tennessee, did also Missouri, and there are a few other states in the make. But by now developing the 3rd generation of the software. So it's really a university spin-off company.
Yeah, that's great. And how much money did they save yearly?
The initial project, which was really not the company yet, but when they started to use it in 2016-17, they made an in-house study in the Pennsylvania Department of Correction, and they quantified it that in a 5 years' time, it's about $19 million what they save. So annually, about $4 million.
Wow, incredible.
So it's coming from multiple savings, from avoiding like incidents and violence in prisons, getting people faster rehabilitated. A lot of transportation is unnecessary if the proper assignment is done. And obviously, finally, they need less people to do it.
Yes, very interesting. And tell me about a story in which you invited Egon Balas to speak at Lehigh in 2016.
Egon Balas was an old good friend. Obviously, I didn't know him when I was still in Hungary. He was leaving Romania as a Hungarian much before I grown up to be an OR researcher. But in the 90s, started to meet him. Even when I was in Holland, and we had a very good relationship. In 2000, he published his life story, The Will for Freedom, describing his life from let's say his teenager years, how he got through say the Second World War, the Hungarian, the Romanian, the German fascists, and the Romanian communist system, and how he got finally to be a OR optimization researcher, how he ended up in Carnegie Mellon. So he wrote that book. I would recommend everybody to read it. It's a really interesting, especially if you have some understanding of East European history. And let's say most of the political figures what he named, that they were still active when I was growing up. So everything was very well known for me. Anyway, so in 2016, so the department has a endowed lecture series when people are giving a technical talk and a public lecture. So I invited Egon that, okay, so obviously in the technical talk for department, faculty, and PhD students, just talk about disjunctive programming, whatever version you want. Students, faculty would like to hear from you how you developed and what it is. But for the public lecture, I insisted that you have to talk about your life, about your book. That took quite a bit of negotiation to convince him that he didn't want to give that talk. He said that writing the book was difficult, but he tried to say there's nobody interested in it. I said, no, I think everybody will be interested in it. So finally he accepted it. So it was a big auditorium with 300 people. There was a lot of students and alumni. Obviously they didn't really know him much, but simply the title abstract was intriguing even for people not from engineering. Even people from political science was coming. But there was a lot of students, and Egon was giving his life story, but he got so emotionally embedded that it was a wonderful experience, that he was completely lost the time. He was
yes, I know what you mean.
So he was speaking already for like 10-15 minutes over time, and I was sharing the lecture session that I was watching, but all of those students were there, all of those alumni was there. Nobody was moving. Nobody was living. Nobody was making noise. Everybody was watching him. So it was really so experience for everybody. And after about 15 minutes over time, he said, Egon, we are already over time. If you can, I said, I didn't even notice that I'm speaking so long. So he wrapped up pretty quickly. There was still questions quite a bit after that, what he answered. So definitely went well over an hour and a half. And then after I said, this was the most difficult lecture to give in his life, but he's happy that he could do it.
Yeah,
and we were
amazing.
even more happy that we could have him.
Yeah.
See that.
And I mean, a man who had lived through so many different experiences, and at that stage, you had the chance to somewhat leave a mark in his life. It should have been a great feeling, right?
Yeah. So this was a special feeling, special experience, not only for me, but for pretty much everybody who participated. But for me, it was double special, at least.
Absolutely. And now let's finally talk about your work on quantum computing. How did you end up entering this field, and what are your long-term predictions regarding its advancements, especially for solving optimization problems?
Quantum computing is another funny, intriguing, exciting development. I'm not a physicist, but I heard about the potential of having quantum computing early 20-some years ago when I was in Canada. So the D-Wave company was funded in Canada by the Canadian government, IBM, and many other companies originally participated in it, and later IBM and others did their own business. But the possibility was already discussed, although it was said that we never know when it will happen. And I always like to do new things, like to explore things, not only new countries as moving many times in life, but exploring the topics. That's why I started the pivot, combinatorial methods, inter-operating methods, ellipsoid methods, and many others, including the PRISM project. So in 2017, I finished my 9 years, 3 times 2 years term as department chair, went on sabbatical, looked around what to do in the next years in my life, especially academically. So, and then I found out that actually there is quantum computer. So IBM already by the time had 4 and 7 qubit machines. D-Wave was having a few hundred qubits, quantum annealer, but others like Rigetti and Google already was popping up. So on one side, for me, the big surprise was actually quantum computer exists. So I said, okay, then I have to understand what it is. The other surprise was that there's actually a lot of papers in quantum computing optimization. And I'm proud to be knowing most of the optimization people, but I did pretty much nobody who wrote those papers. So I said, okay, that's something to explore here, what's going on here. Turned out that all of those papers written by wonderful quantum physicists, theoretical computer scientists with quantum physics background and knowledge, but the optimization community is almost completely absent from that, except some people doing quadratic unconstrained binary optimization problems. So anyway, that was the kind of motivation that, okay, this is something what I want to understand. And then started to explore it, give a kind of very short PR-like lecture for the new PhD students of the department, where old PhD students were present. And for my big surprise, next day, several of them come to my office that we don't really understand what you talk about it, but it looks intriguing, look very exciting. And those some of those become the first PhD students in the group. So to make it short, so we established a quantum computing optimization laboratory with some of my colleagues, Luis Zulaga, Xiu Yang, with an initial group of PhD students. At the time when we really didn't have publication record on quantum computing optimization, we got a more than $2 million DARPA grant to explore optimization quantum computing, because all the other groups were physicists and other people who not real optimizers almost exclusively. So we were the special people who come from optimization on that. But that was a huge impetus. And by now we are having a huge footprint in quantum computing optimization for continuous optimization, inter-operating methods, more quantum algorithms, also on the discrete and the quantum error correction or modeling side. In INFORMS, we are having the Quantum Computing and Operations Research Ad Hoc Committee, what I co-chair with David Bernal, and also had a really good people from IBM to academics, young faculty like my former students, Mohamed Hossein and Rebecca Herman from CERNS. So in the last, let's say, 6-7 years, from a very handful of people, now we are having at least a substantial group where we made a big contribution to develop that group on that. So quantum computing, every computing will be a great tool for optimizers, but we have to rethink, redevelop everything by using the good parts of quantum computing and mitigating the not so good parts of quantum computing. But yes, you have to realize that quantum computing today is not, as the actual hardware, is probably comparable to what was the digital computer in around 1950. So around the early time before the silicon transistor and the integrated circuits was developed. So some technology changes needed to get the quantum computers reliable, error-free, scalable on that. So there was a huge, let's say, unrealistic expectation like 6-7 years ago that we get there in 5 years' time. Now everybody says probably people need another 10 years to reach that level on that. But if a good technology change is coming quicker, then it might be only 5 years, but nobody really knows exactly. But there's a lot of technologies to make quantum computers today, from different materials, different physical quantum phenomena, including artificial diamonds and lasers and ions and many others, beyond the most used at this point superconducting qubits.
And let's see who can come up with an equivalent of a transistor to quantum computers and, suddenly turn the world upside down. And what can you share about your work on quantum interior point methods?
Okay, so myself is, besides in general, interested in quantum computing and computing, because I was always interested in computing. My major contribution is really quantum interior point methods. With my current and former students. And so essentially quantum interior point methods in a general high level is like interior point methods classically. We are using the same central path. We are following the same central path with solving a Newton system at every iteration. And obviously you can do this for linear, second-order conic, semi-definite. We are just working on it extending to more general convex too. But the major point at this point of time is all of these quantum interior point methods are hybrid algorithms, essentially solving the Newton system using the power of linear algebra from quantum computing. That's embedded in the interior point method structure. But quantum computers are noisy. You cannot really extract the quantum state without error. So we had to rethink how we think about interior point methods. So we developed something what we call inexact feasible interior point methods. So with inexact calculation, we still keep feasibility because that allows us to keep the best iteration complexity. To take care of the other negative side of quantum linear algebra, that every system can be solved in very high efficiency by dimension. But besides the precision, it also depends on the condition number of the Newton system, of the coefficient matrix. Unfortunately, in interior point methods, we know already for long. We had a paper with my colleagues in 1993 about degeneracy in interior point methods. So the condition number of the Newton system is going to infinity if we approach optimality for every degenerate problem. And in practice, every problem is degenerate. So how to deal with this condition number dependence, which goes to infinity? So we combine now the quantum linear algebra with iterative refinement, which also in general gives exponentially better precision results and complexity results, just solving a linear system in general, including coming from PDEs and many other application areas. So while we focus in interior point methods and the general structure is very similar, we still have to reinvent many elements on that. And even classic, we can channel this back to plugging in like conjugate gradient methods in the linear solver, what was never successful before in interior point methods, primarily because they are good with low precision, but they are very slow if you get high precision. So we can, let's say, plug in conjugate gradients in the low precision condition number dependent architecture instead of the quantum linear solver too. So by getting completely new quantum interior point methods, we are also getting completely new classic interior point methods on that. And both of them actually having better complexity than what we had before. So this is really an exciting, it's very similar developments that at end of 80s, after Karmarkar's paper was coming, that we have to rethink everything. We have to re-evaluate how we talk about algorithms. That's when, even for nonlinear world, that's when complexity was starting to filter in. In the 1970s, people was proving only asymptotic convergence. Nobody was talking about complexity of algorithms. Maybe exception is Nemirovsky and Yudin.
Yes, very exciting research for sure. So Tamás, you are the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Optimization Theory and Applications, also known as JOTA. Would you like to comment on this role and your other editorial activities?
So right now I'm editor-in-chief of JOTA. JOTA is the oldest journal with the name of optimization in it. So as I grown up in my professional life, then JOTA was always there. I published several papers there. So by now 6 years ago, the Springer editors were approaching me that they are looking for a new editor-in-chief for JOTA. So after a bit of discussions, we agreed that, okay, this is something which it's a worth to do because it's an important journal. Honestly, I didn't really realize that how much work is to process more than 1,000 papers a year.
More than 1,000 papers?
So we are now 1st of December this year. So today I got the 1,200, number 1,200 paper this year to submit it.
Wow.
So the journal is publishing, let's say 12 issues. It's about 230 papers a year by now. So 5 years ago, it was below 200, but it's grown and it's still growing as the field in general is growing. So I would say it's a great experience. It's an important thing to do. And as everything, I try to do it right on that. I had a very good colleagues. Obviously, this wouldn't work without the many dedicated editors of the journal, because the editor-in-chief is essentially assigning papers to editors and then monitoring and approving and making the final decisions. But the actual reviewer is done by the editors, inviting the proper editors. So in some way, I would say this is probably a natural development for me, starting from the optimization and engineering, and then being on the editorial board of many journals, for many of them for many, many years. But so did always this kind of work in that. So I thought, okay, this is something that I probably have to do it once, and accepted it. So, but the journal is in a great shape. So work with the editors, and it's rewarding to see also that when all the authors say that zero complaint at the end of the year, as the publisher is making all the surveys.
I mean, I'm not surprised. Like anything you get your hands on, you kind of turn it to gold, or you make a tremendous impact. Tamás, do you have any regrets?
Not really. In general, I'm a very positive person, so always looking forward. Obviously, sometimes it's crossing your mind what would have happened if you would have done something differently, but I'm not really spending time on that, because something would be different, but you don't know really which way it would have gone on that, including all of this topic changes in optimization, operations research, all the application projects. It was great. Changing countries was very challenging, but I don't regret that I did it. I learned a lot more about the world, a lot more about everything around this way, probably professionally. Also, I had to rebuild everything, which is also good, because if you rebuild, then you have to reevaluate what is really worth to keep and redevelop on that. So I don't really have any regret on that. But I definitely would say that this would not have been possible without having my wife with me for by now only 49 years married, but more than 50 years together on that. So with him, with her, and also with our son getting through all the 4 countries, although actually our son stayed in Canada after PhD, and now it's in a very far north of Canada, Yellowknife, deputy director of the geological survey there. So he's very successful on his own time. He left us in Hamilton going for a PhD, so that's why we could leave Canada to come here. So really, without them, without many of the other friends and colleagues who were always great supportive collaborators, I wouldn't be here today. But primarily, really, my wife and son.
Yeah. And what can you expect from you in the coming years?
Definitely in the coming years, research-wise, I will keep doing the quantum computing optimization. So what exactly? That's hard to say. Continuing on the interpolation methods, because just I'm very familiar with it and probably quite good in it. With my students, starting to also explore the mixed integer part, also with some colleagues, Giacomo Nanissini, David Bernal, having an NSF project of chemical process engineering optimization with quantum computers, and Luis Zulaga from Lehigh. But keeping really the algorithmic complexity developments, watching how the hardware possibilities are coming, because there were also giving new opportunities or new challenges, how to get great algorithms, which sometimes might be considered to be not so practical at the beginning, like interpolation methods in the 1950s, 60s didn't look like so powerful as they become in the end of the 80s, 90s, and since then. So all of this will give me keeping a lot of activities to be busy, and I keep working also in INFORMS and journal editorial works, and simply enjoying working with my students and colleagues.
Yeah, you mentioned David Bernal. I would like to thank him for connecting us. Gracias, David. Yeah, and so I'm looking forward to hearing the news from you in the future regarding your work on quantum computing and entry point methods. So best of luck on that. And would you like to give a final message to our young audience?
It's always dangerous to give advice to young people. On one side, my advice is always that I can help But you have to make your choices. You have to figure out what you are good in it. You have to figure out what you are passionate about it. And don't always take the evolution advice to some older people. Just like in the beginning of my career, when I started to do pivot algorithms, many people in the older generation of Hungary told me linear programming is dead. And I'm happily worked on it in the last 45, 50 years on that. But whatever you do, you have to do with your passion. You have to be, let's say, very rigorous and innovative and keep up doing it. Because if you give up early, and you give up many times, then you will never get to any goal on that. And just as I was maybe ignorant, maybe brave to meet Danzig, meet Paul Erdős, asking questions, insisting that I really want to explain them something. Those things are very good for everybody, that don't be too shy. If you think it's important, try to make it happen.
Very nice piece of advice. Tamás, I could listen to your stories for more hours, but I think we can call it a day. I don't know how to thank you for your time. You are certainly someone with great achievements, including breaking the record for the longest subject to episode so far. And I mean, it was lovely to hear your stories. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Anand. So thanks you for giving me this opportunity. And as you've seen, I definitely enjoyed all of this discussion with you. I hope it was not too long.
Yeah, it's only 2 a.m. around here, but it's fine. No, come on. It was a pleasure, really. Yeah, so take care, Tamás, especially of your health, of your wife. And I hope to meet you in person one of these days.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah, okay.
If you are coming to any of the optimization conferences.
Yeah, let's see. And if you were visiting Brazil, who knows, we can meet also in the future. All right.
Yeah, if I go,
okay.
I definitely will make the swing towards you.
Great. So thanks again. Bye, Tamás, and take care. Ciao.
Thank you, Alan. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Ciao.